tiny people and we play with them. Ooh, ooh. We paint tiny people and we play with them.
Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Miniatures Monthly at the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston, and as ever, I'm joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Number 7 is the number of Nurgle.
Oh, we got it wrong last time.
We did. It was the number of Slanesh last time.
Okay. It did feel like an especially kinky week.
You-
Month even.
They always are. And today, I've got a cold, so those things all
Even better.
all
that's
add
true.
up.
It's all-
Yeah,
So we have to beat each other to death when it's Corn's.
yeah. That's next month.
So we die next month.
Is
the end of
beating each
Miniatures
other to
Monthly.
death. And then the episode after that is all change with a new cast.
hosts,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. The cast will be like a tentacle and a fish.
We'll pass on our skulls to them so that they can keep the magic going.
Yeah, well, you got that to look forward to. So yeah, we had to announce the cancellation of the podcast with next month's episode. That's not true. We're not doing that.
We're carrying on.
How are you, Tom? How's your month of stuff been?
Very well. Actually, I've not had a huge amount of time to paint many miniatures. I've done some Space Marines, some Primaris in the Iron Hands chapter scheme, which was fun. But apart from that, I've mostly been playing, actually. Been doing loads of Path to Glory, loads of exciting games of AOS, and
Rad.
waiting for the General's Handbook, which is one of the just incredible amount of news that's happened this month.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I too have had a limited amount of time, but it's all gone into one big boy, one big bird boy. But we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, you're right. This has been a kind of, they've all felt like they've been nuts months for news.
Yeah,
and I
it's
think
true.
maybe that's you and I adjusting to the different pace of news in Miniatures Land, where stuff just comes out constantly.
Yeah.
But, it has nonetheless been a big, when we were putting through the list of topics for news, it just kind of gets absurd at a certain point, but we will try and get through it. So we should start with the General's Handbook, I think, because that is, obviously the biggest change of the year to the game we play the most. If you're not aware, the General's Handbook is sort of like a supplementary rulebook for Age of Sigmar, and to be honest, now it kind of is the rulebook for Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
And it's not, and rather than go through editions of the game, there's a new General's Handbook every year. And so 2017 has just come out, which means a lot of things from, adjustments to like new scenarios, but also points adjustments across the board, and is accompanied by a pretty substantial set of FAQs that sort of clean up the game. We haven't had a chance to play with it properly. Mine hasn't arrived yet at the time that we're recording this, which sucks, but yours has, Tom. So what's your take on it been so far?
It's really interesting. There's the new allegiance abilities and kind of command traits and extra rules for like dozens of armies that didn't have them. So one of the things the General's Handbook does is it updates all of the rules to give factions access to allegiance abilities, that kind of thing, who wouldn't otherwise get one without an army book. And some of those guys are never getting army books realistically ever again because they're really quite old factions, like Wanderers, which is the new name for the old Wood Elves. So they've got really cool rules. They can retreat and shoot, so they can kind of fade back and attack, a bit like Space Marines can in 40k. And they're really inventive and they're really different. Iron Jaws has had like loads of new rules and even battalions and stuff added. So it really is just a top down, like a completely refreshes the meta, completely refreshes a lot of the rules, and gives you new ways to play with your old models that you might not necessarily have used in the last year because they've been kind of out of favour.
It does feel like it feels like one big patch to the game.
Yeah, for
basically, like Skaven got loads of new stuff as well.
Yeah.
There are new ally rules, which
yeah.
is a really nice system. So that means that basically approximately 20% of your points can now go on allies. Each faction has a different list of allies that it can take, potentially. And it's quite limiting, like not everyone can be friends with everybody else. And that means that you can have something from a different faction in your army or up to a certain amount of points, without losing your allegiance ability, which is the kind of the set of bonuses you get for being a particular force. So for me, it's the Tzeentch Destiny Dice stuff, which is a really nice system because, it does the positive thing of opening up the amount of stuff you can use, basically with some limitations. But I think it's interesting because the first General's Handbook brought in points, which kind of easy to forget now. Brought in points as a concept and brought in and started to make allegiance abilities more of a thing. And they've become steadily more of a thing with the factions that have come out this year and the updates that have happened this year. And the game's kind of become to some extent about those things. And if you play competitively, that's the qualifier, right? As ever, there's, this is maybe the thing, right? Like, as ever, there's nothing stopping you from playing with whatever models you have and house rulesing, whatever it is you want the house rules to make the game feel right for you. And to be honest, you should do that. And the book is full of little sidebars where it says, do that.
Yeah, sure.
But no one does that. People want official stamps on things. They want an official way to break the rules. And the ally system feels like that in a way. It's sort of Games Workshop saying, fine, if you're not going to just jury rig something like this into the game, here is a formalized system for adding different models while keeping your allegiance ability.
Yeah, it's super nice. I love the allies rule. And it's like, it could be really themey, and I've got some sort of spare Sylvaneth just because I wanted to paint the models up. Now suddenly I can just slot them into my Stormcast army. That unlocks like a load of different kind of interesting, combinations. So Sylvaneth, Dryads are a good kind of massed unit. You can have loads of them, and Stormcast doesn't have anything like that. So suddenly my army has gained that kind of potential thing, like a target unit, which you didn't have access to before. But I was going to create some Sylvaneth. I've got a Branch Witch. I'm going to put some Wanderers in there as well because it's themey. And I've got some Kernoth Hunters, and that's probably like a good little chunk to add to my Stormcast. And also you get to build a story around that. Like, how did they meet? Why are they rolling together? All that good stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I say, there was nothing stopping you doing that before.
No, it's true.
But there's something about the stamp of approval that makes it feel more real.
Yeah,
and even I'm becoming more and more of a, like, I play this for fun and I'm not worried about winning. Like, this is a narrative thing for me.
Yeah.
I'm becoming more confident that that's how I want to enjoy it. But even me made me look at the table and think, what can I take with my Disciples of Tzeentch now that makes a difference? And the answer is nothing that I want. But nonetheless, like, it's funny. It's funny that what the difference having it be official makes.
Yeah.
The other big sort of thematic change that's happened to the game, and probably so a lot of the points adjustments are, things being tuned up and down based on things that were undercosted or overcosted in the way that you'd expect. And normally those changes are in the order of about like 20 to 40 points. So a lot of the demons I use went down, which is really nice. It means I can fit more of them in the list. But things like the Tzeentch Skyfires, which are very, very powerful, went up a bunch because they've been, reliably winning tournaments. The big thing that feels more like a kind of a statement on the part of Games Workshop, a statement beyond we would like the game to be more balanced, is what's happened to battalions.
Yeah.
So battalions are, essentially like, almost like shopping lists of units. And if you have everything on the list for the battalion, then you can add the battalion to your army, which gives you some extra bonus for the units that are in that battalion. And they also have a bunch of, the example, I don't know, like the Hammerstrike Brethren is something for Stormcast that allows you to use, you have some prosecutors and you have some retributors, and you can send the prosecutors forwards and bring the retributors down on top of the prosecutors.
Yeah.
You gain that power. There's a crazy one for Tzeentch, which I'll do. I need more. It's for Tzeentch Mortals, which is why I can't do it yet. But it just means that every single weapon that they have gains -1 rend.
Right.
Yeah. Which is,
that's
like
right.
In the battalion. The other reasons battalions have been good in the past is, well, for one thing, they give you extra artifacts. You can take one extra artifact in your army for every battalion you are taking. And also, you can choose when you're deploying to deploy a battalion as if it were a single unit rather than deploying each unit in the battalion separately, which is a big deal in Age of Sigmar if you're playing competitively, because the player who finishes setting up first, can choose who takes the first turn. And that is often a very big deal. So, what are called one drop armies, where your entire army is one battalion and you can just throw it down on the board, are also a big deal. So, it might be surprising to hear, if you don't know aware of the system, they have all of those strengths, and previously a battalion cost like pocket change amount of points. Like it was like 40 to 60. Maybe some of them really expensive ones were like 100 points.
Yeah.
But that's usually the kinds of points you'd have left over. Like, the awkward, you get to 1940 points for your list, your 2,000 point list, and you'll just slot in a 40 or 60 point battalion in there. Almost every battalion in the game has gone up by at least 100 points, which is a kind of interesting change. Like Hammerstrike went up a lot, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it's at 220, which is the price of 5 Retributor Paladins.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a really big deal. It's interesting because it forces you to build a list around that thing, and rather than just sort of taking things on the off chance. And also it recognizes all the points cost reflect the wide range of utility you just described. It's almost like they were pointed as, for the rules that what they actually let you do on the battlefield, and didn't take into account the idea that it lets you control turn order to some extent. And the extra artifacts are useful as well. Hammer Strike is amazing. It's one of the sort of it's a totally dick thing to do to someone, because the rules for summoning things down always force you to summon down your unit 9 inches away from the enemy, and your charge roll is on 2d6, so your odds off on getting that charge off on a 9 on 2d6, whereas the Hammer Strike lets you kind of put them, I think, like 6 inches away or something crazy. So then your odds on to make the charge, which is a big deal if you're going to try to get your Retributors, very expensive units, into something important like a Lord of Change. Yeah.
It's interesting because, like I was thinking about, I really like this change. It's been one of those, there's been some grumbling about it, and there's been some, people happy about it. I'm happy about it. I think on balance, there's a few reasons for that. One is that, I think most of those battalions are worth the cost of a unit, which is kind of where they've been costed to.
Yeah.
They're now the cost of like a good unit, basically. Most of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a trade-off, because often, the impact of a battalion is often losing a unit. Basically, like, when the Hammer Strike comes down with the Star Soul Maces that do automatic mortal wounds and things from Retributors, you're probably going to kill something expensive, or get it into kill range with that when you do it.
Yeah.
And so it should probably cost you an amount of points equal probably to the thing you're going to kill, because you're taking that away from your opponent, right? Like, you both spend 160 points, because if you bring that down and let's say you brought it down and you got my Lord of Change to half health, using that set of abilities. This didn't happen, by the way. We're not alluding to anything that happened later, but nonetheless, then, previously you would have done like half health on a 300 point model.
Yeah.
With the pocket change left over, with units you were going to take anyway. And I think that's the thing. I think the other thing is, because a lot of the time you wanted those units, it was a complete no-brainer, so there was no decision made to be made there, right? Of course you take it. I think it also has a knock-on effect of making the game a lot more friendly to new players, because it's quite unlikely that when you build your first 1,000 points or whatever, it depends on the faction, but it's quite unlikely that you're going to have a good battalion.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference, right? Like, it now feels a lot better, right? That like, if you have just 1,000 points worth of stuff and your friend has a battalion, then realistically they have an 800 point army and a bonus that's really obvious, but it's a huge bonus.
Yeah.
Which feels a bit better than them having a 960 point army and this trick you can do.
Yeah.
And I think in turn that helps the game feel thing of like, oh, by the way, the Retributor bus is coming.
The formations like that do kind of limit your list building, I find, as well. So you're building it towards, it's easy enough if as you say, I was going to take 2 units of Retributors and some Prosecutors anyway for Hammer Strike. But there's one which is like a really insane shooting one where you've got like a Venator, you've got like an Osiris, you've got a couple of units of Judicators and some long strikes. And it's like, well, that's like a third of the army built for me if I take that thing. And I prefer having the choice of actually I want to spend these 700 points on, a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm, a lot of my kind of stuff I've been doing this month is revolved around the fact that at the end of this week, I'm going to Blackout at Firestorm in Cardiff, which is, pretty big. It's going to be like 80 plus players. Right. Age of Sigmar event, the biggest, certainly only the second event I've ever done and definitely the biggest. And I've got to bring a 2,000 point army, which I am going to be doing some speed painting this week to get ready for. But it's been this, one thing's, I was waiting for was, the new points have only come out a week in advance of the event. Right. So everyone involved is going to have to have been waiting to see, because they said that they would, if the handbook was out in time, they would use the handbook. And that's fun, right? Everyone gets to sort of see the new stuff for the first time. Yeah. But it's become a really interesting decision because, I was going to take a battalion called the Change Host, which is fun, but also reasonably competitive for Tzeentch Demons, which is a Lord of Change and 8 plus other demons, basically demon units.
Yeah.
And then in my hero phase, depending on how many of them are around, I can start swapping them. So you think you're charging the Lord of Change, but guess what? He's some pink horrors now.
Right.
And you think you're charging the Changeling, but guess what? He's some screamers now. They have to be within a bubble of the Lord of Change to do it, but it's kind of interesting, kind of themey.
Yeah.
And that was previously 60 points. So it's kind of a no-nonsense bolt-on at the end of the thing. It's now 160 points.
Right.
Which is the same as the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, which is a guy I like a lot for his buff and stuff. And it's left me with an interesting decision to make, because I know me, and I know the one thing I probably don't need to add to my Tzeentch army is a very complicated thing to do in the hero phase.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I have enough of them, and I miss 3 crucial ones every single time I play the game.
Yeah.
And the flip side as well is that, like, I have no illusions about my success rate in Age of Sigmar. I'm a man who's won 2 games ever. So I shouldn't really be going to this tournament thinking, time to win some games.
Yeah, yeah.
The only thing I have a chance of maybe doing okay in is like painting best army, something like that. I don't think I will because like there are a lot of amazing painters going, so I don't think I have a huge chance. But getting an extra model is more of a bonus in that regard. So I'm sort of thinking about using my 160 points on a character. Also, partly from a story point of view, I quite like the idea of having this one sorcerer in the middle of this huge tide of demons. Like, it's coming from him in a way.
He's joined the wrong party bus.
Exactly.
He's like he's part of a stag do he never asked.
He's gone on holiday by mistake to hell. Yes. So, actually, I've just decided that, that my, I mentioned it before, my Chaos Sorcerer Lord, whose idea is he never really gets blessed with the full kind of demonhood thing. Yeah. I think his attitude towards that should be like kind of with Nell and I style frustrated actor, like just sort of deadbeat Sorcerer Lord of Tzeentch, just sort of wandering around a moor. Good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've decided that now.
He's something always interesting happens around that hero. I don't know what
yeah, we'll get there later. Yeah, he's definitely the main character of these games. Even if, like literally just, I mean, I suppose he's tasted success exactly once, but yeah, he's the sort of, maybe the other comparison, he's kind of like the Joe Bluth of, there's a lot of I've made a huge mistake moments in his life.
Yes. He's made bad
We will get to that later. But yeah, so that's a huge change to the game. So we're still kind of, so the book is out. We haven't played with it properly yet, because mine hasn't arrived, which is a thing.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's great though. It's really good.
The other thing it's been accompanied by is, so last time on the podcast we talked about, we played the game of 40k. We played with the open war cards for 40k, which are kind of like a deck of cards that generate a scenario for you on the fly.
Yeah, it's really good.
And I loved them, and I kind of wanted only to ever play that way.
Yes.
And they came out for AOS
Hooray.
at the same time as General's Handbook.
Yeah,
so
great stuff. Yeah, I've got mine at home.
Yeah, so that's gonna be.
We'll play with those next time.
Yeah, I imagine we will. The other thing that has happened, which is interesting, is alongside the General's Handbook, they issued a huge set of FAQs, so rules updates for everything else in the game, which went a lot deeper than I thought they would.
Right.
They weren't just like, wording clarifications or things. They're like, they've like completely changed one of the spells from the Disciples of Tzeentch book to just make it do something else, because it was kind of too confusing and niche as it was.
Right.
And it's interesting to see how willing they are to just, because I come from an X-Wing background where a lot of the years of balancing that game have been around. There's been sort of some things about giving rules or cards or whatever that have almost felt like taboo when it comes to FAQing them. Like, everyone kind of understands, like, you can FAQ this, but that's too far. Changing the points value of something is too far. Changing something that's been printed on a card is too far. You can work out the rules behind the scenes, but not so. But not so GW, who over the course of this month, both in 40k and in Age of Sigmar, have been making some pretty dramatic changes to games, which has been interesting, particularly for 40k.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you saw, like, within like a week of a big American tournament, they completely FAQ'd out one build.
Right.
Which is kind of something I wanted to discuss, because it's so traditionally, when change has come slower to these games, winning a lot of tournaments means breaking the game. But I say winning a lot of tournaments. I don't mean it's not possible to win a tournament using whatever, because Squigs won the Open.
Heat 3, yeah.
But if what you care about doing is going to a lot of tournaments and winning a lot of tournaments, everyone probably knows the ways that you will achieve that, right?
Yeah,
like,
broadly.
Yeah, there are ways of exploiting loopholes and things. And predominantly Games Workshop games are about exploiting loopholes if all you want to do is win, I think. Like, that tends to be it. And then there is obviously the, drama and skill and stuff, but it comes from two armies that are both trying to exploit loopholes, meeting each other. If you go with just normal stuff, you're probably doomed at a certain point. And that's one of the reasons this handbook update is so exciting. But the thing that I've been interested in this month is, with FAQ changes arriving so quickly, I wonder if they're trying to send the message that chasing that far end of the meta, like the breaking the game meta, isn't worth it. Because it's expensive, right? Like, it's expensive to go out and buy, like, the example this month is, so do you see the Carriage and Overlords thing?
No, I'm not sure.
They changed,
they rewrote a War Scroll, didn't they?
Yeah, they rewrote an entire War Scroll and just put it in the General's Handbook as like a bonus thing.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was, this is super interesting. This is total, like, spirit of the game, letter of the game thing, which I think is at the heart of, like, all Warhammer arguments.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
And all Warhammer game feel things as well, right? Like, all the feel bad stuff. So there's I think it's one of the, it's the Grundstock gun people. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Something
Tom.
like that.
Yeah, gun Carriage and Overlords guys. So if you buy the box, they have the stuff to be kitted out a bit like a Space Marine Tactical Squad. You have like mostly guys with rifles, one guy with a big heavy weapon and one guy with a special weapon, right? It kind of maps kind of cleanly onto a Tactical Squad in some ways.
Nice.
Right? And that's what you get in the box. Enough bits to do that. However, the War Scroll, doesn't or didn't explicitly list, what, I might be getting slightly wrong, but didn't explicitly list how many of each weapon you were allowed.
Okay.
In their rules writing, they got a bit sloppy and just sort of assumed you would go with what was in the book. And then there's another, I think it's the Ether Chemist, which has now been FAQ'd as well. His ability was you pick one weapon in the group and that weapon is better.
Right.
So the way you can see the intent of the rules writers, which was people will build them with mostly rifles, one heavy weapon, one special weapon. And then they have to make the choice with the Ether Chemist is do they buff the normal guns or do they buff the heavy weapon for its one shot?
Yeah.
What people did was go out and buy 10 boxes, which costs 250 quid to build one unit of 10 who all have the cannons, like the big guns.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing in the rule stopping that for a moment. And that's obviously devastating because then you've maxed all of the maxed and minned all of the min and you've ended up with something that's really, really, really good. And the General's Handbook and the latest FAQs just removed that from the game. You just can't legally do that now. And, there's going to be, there's a lot of those character overlords on eBay now because, that's, like,
Oh dear.
and a similar thing happened in 40k where like the thing that was winning all the tournaments when new 40k came out was all Raven Wings, I think, which is like one of the flyers, Storm Ravens, all Storm Ravens.
Oh yeah.
So it was like Robert Gelliman and 8 Storm Ravens or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's because they could fly over to your side of the board and kill you in turn 1 and that was the game.
Yeah.
And so they just immediately FAQ'd it so that flyers can't take objectives. And if flyers, basically there's like a new rule where at the start of the second turn you have to roll a dice. I can't remember. Basically you lose if you have a certain amount of units not on the board and flyers don't count.
I see, right. So it forces you to have some infantry.
You have to have something on the ground.
Yeah,
and, they basically explicitly said, this is a game about ground combat. Flyers are there to support the ground combat. You can't do this. And even then, like, the bus rolls on. Like, the most recent 40k tournament was won by, like, 11 assassins
Right.
standing in a line in front of Rabuk Gilliman. Because the shooting nearest target thing means, because the assassins are really hard to shoot at. So you have to shoot the same slippery man 11 times before you're allowed to shoot Rabuk Gilliman.
That's amusing.
So this shit will always exist.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the fact that they're now, it's not like, oh, that didn't work. That's not going to work in the next edition that comes 4 years down the line, but it might not work next week.
Right.
I wonder if that is intended. It hasn't happened yet, but I wonder if that's intended to send the message that it's not going to be worth chasing this sort of thing. The sort of, what I would call a kind of degenerate meta. I think maybe the ultimate solution to this is to write rules that can't be quite so brutally exploited.
Yeah.
But it's
there's always a
interesting.
way around though, isn't there? I mean, that their rules writing is getting better. There seems to be fewer of this, but there's so many war scrolls that can interact, now that it just seems inevitable that the complexity of the system will allow for edge cases to always be there.
Yeah, but I wonder if that's what they're accepting. So they're saying like, we're always going to have edge cases, but we're going to issue FAQs every week.
Back it off, yeah.
Yeah, basically, yes. Fack it off.
Yeah, so that's really good for the game. I really enjoyed the last heat, which was won by Squigs, but there's lots of Zinch there, and the in vogue thing was to run loads of Skyfires, regenerating Skyfires, because they get the demon keyword
From the disc.
they're on, so that lets them be targeted by a spell that can target demons and bring them back from the dead.
Well, technically, it brings them back from a reality where they didn't die.
That's true.
Zinch things.
Which is very, very good. Skyfires are very good anyway. They're really good in combat. They're really good in shooting. They're really good, really fast. They're just a great unit. The way they've responded, was they've still got the keyword and stuff. They're just a lot more expensive now, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, you can take this themed list, but it's going to be your list. Like, it's not just going to be,
I think, so there's one bit of the FAQ I don't fully understand, but it sounds like, because they get a lot of buffs from the Zangor Shaman, who also rides around on a disc, and that's intended, right?
Yes.
They're supposed to be an elite unit that gets more elite if it's got an elite hero next to it, which is fine. The thing was, it wasn't just that, because the spell that brings them back is Fold Reality, which I use in the legal way, because I have it on a herald that brings back horrors and screamers and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, not the legal way, the intended way.
Sure.
But that is a demon spell. So it's a demon spell that can be taken by demons that targets demons. And the only reason that works with the Skyfire Shaman combo is because the Shaman is on a disc and the Skyfires are on discs.
Right.
So the Shaman can take the spell and the Skyfires can be affected by it. And they've seemed to have FAQ'd that as well.
Okay.
Because they made a wording change to like, it's not exact, and someone smarter than me needs to tell me what exactly it means, but it sounds like it means basically don't be a dick with the keywords. Like, demons can take, like, it makes it almost like a story thing. Like, it almost, this is an interesting thing I haven't seen them do elsewhere. It sounds like they're basically detaching which units can take which spells from the keywords and attaching it to what they are.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like, you know, if you are a mortal, you take, but it's like lowercase mortal. You take these. If you are a demon, you take these.
Yeah.
So you'd have to like look your opponent in the eye and argue that the Zangor Shaman was a demon when you know it isn't.
Yeah, okay.
Which is kind of almost an interesting way of fixing it.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But yeah, so they have to fix that. But yeah, that took a combination of points changes and FAQs and things.
Yeah.
It's gone now.
But then, like, there are a lot of those lists around, but it's still, they did well, but they didn't dominate, in Heat 3. Like, there was a strong variety of stuff. It's a little bit sad when I think the relegation zone is a sad place for an army to fall into. So it's almost like what stuff is doing terribly.
Yeah.
And Death's doing okay, but not quite as well as it could do perhaps, and they've received a lot of point changes that could bring Death back into tournament play, which is great because I love Death armies. And it's just a way of kind of stirring the pot basically for a year. And realistically, like, people will figure out loopholes. But only who's going to drop £250? People do, but
yeah. It's interesting. Like, I find myself moving further and further away from, wanting to be a competitive player. Like, I will always be like into the story and the painting first.
Yeah.
That's where most of my time goes, honestly. Like, I spend 90%, 95% of my hobby time painting and reading books and 5% playing the game. And so, like, a lot of this stuff will probably never be relevant to me specifically. And I'm interested in how it feels relevant in some way.
Yeah.
Like, but like, but that is more broadly because I think of the impact that, the addition of points has had on the game. Like, I still think that the whole idea of a pointsless war game where you play for fun and you balance things with the person you're playing with is a beautiful doomed dream. Like, I still support the idea. I don't think it was a disaster. And I think you can see in absolute real time the impact that change with the first General's Handbook has had on what Age of Sigmar is to the people who like it. You know what I mean? Like, it's certainly gotten a lot more popular, and that's a good thing, and it's certainly a lot bigger than it was.
Yeah.
Although it was apparently doing okay. And obviously people seem a bit happier with it in general, which is great. Like, there's been lots of good changes. But it's almost like, to get into it, you don't have to kind of pass under the test of, are you going to be okay with the fact that the balance of this game is deliberately woolly and that you're encouraged to just try and have fun? Because I think that's a super interesting thing with war games, right? Like, the amount of like emotional or like the amount of sort of self-discipline you need to maintain to not to get salty, to not get frustrated by things, to not turn everything super competitive. And points feel like a magnet for that as a concept, right?
Yeah.
People sort of, as soon as they exist, everything revolves around them. As soon as there are matched play scenarios, that are the fair scenarios, those are the only ones you play. And I think it's an interesting thing to try and resist. It's one of the reasons that the open war cards I really like, because they feel like they structure the game, but they lean towards the way I would like to play it most of the time, which is like, let's just play a fun thing.
I think if you're playing AOS and you're not playing at that very highest level, I think it really stands up as a war game. I think it's like really, you can play competitively and take competitive lists. And I've played some really good games this month against my friend Chimp and Path to Glory, where it has been tactical and competitive. But because our armies aren't like super honed, it becomes about maneuvering and how you actually use your units and thinking about positioning. It's a really good positioning game. It's almost like it's a shame that the top tier, the very, very, very top tier, sort of sullies it a little bit. And I don't know why that is, but I mean, I shouldn't really care what does.
But it doesn't affect us, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't affect the way I'm going to play with you or my other friends.
Yeah. I mean, like, fair play. Like, if that's how people enjoy the game, I don't have a problem with that in principle. Actually, and to be honest, like, at that end of the spectrum, if you were willing to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds staying on top of the meta, chasing it, like, more power to you, honestly, because you're not going to impact my enjoyment of the game. And
exactly,
if that's how you enjoy it, whatever. I guess what I'm talking about is, I think it's interesting the impact that points have on people who don't play at the top level, but play at every level. Like, there's still that sort of anxiety about sort of exact fairness and whether things are overpriced or underpriced based on performance in games.
That's
sort of, which, there's, this comes down to the sort of lots of the interesting kind of like Dunning-Kruger psychological things that happen around war games, happen around anything that involves dice.
Right.
You have the amount of things your brain can do to explain why you feel bad about something bad happening to your plastic men include, this is overpriced, this is underpriced, that's overpriced, that's underpriced, my dice did this, my dice should have done that, you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
and these games are, given that they're ultimately about like a positive interaction with another person, you stand around a table with another person, play for 3 hours, you get quite a lot of negative feelings from the more kind of like, anything that involves a number is basically what I'm saying. That when they made AOS, they basically tried to move it away from, points towards play. And they put points back in and they completely rule the conversation about the game now, as you might be expected to do. But there is still that original game in there. And that's why, like, the game we played today, which we'll get onto later, I'm really happy that we moved a little bit away from worrying too much about the points.
Yeah.
But it's really, really, really hard to convince players to go that way, I think.
Yeah, power level in 40k seems like an interesting way to solve that, where you're not worrying about precise equipment values for, pointing up your units. You're just saying, well, that's about 14 power, that's about 8 power. And it gives you a ballpark what to expect from that thing, like what it might be able to kill. Maybe that's a halfway house where it gives people the structure without necessarily the micro control.
I think they're doing a really good job, actually. I think power levels are a good example of it. The open war cards are another good example of just encouraging this sort of thing. And it's interesting to me that feels like that's their mission to some extent at the moment, is to not, people can play however they want, but to nurture narrative and open forms of play where people don't worry so much about points.
I think, like, thinking about the way kids play the game as well is part of it. Like young kids probably might not care about points. They care more about the story. And as far, like, the open war cards thing is really great because there's a lot of shuffling through books before a game can happen. Before the open war cards, anything that can shorten that process and like reduce the admin around playing Warhammer is good because it's weirdly admin heavy game. Yeah. Not just like carting stuff around, actually, bringing all the rules books. And my rules are spread across multiple books now that have been fact digitally. So some of the information in them is wrong, and keeping up with all that stuff. Like, actually, here's a pack of cards. You just draw the cards and then you play the thing. You've got power levels, just sort of match them up roughly and it's fine. And you're in a game in 15 minutes. Which has brought you miniatures, and that seems to be as much the aim as like changing the culture of the thing, is giving people, it's about accessibility as well.
Yeah.
It's really good.
That's true. I think maybe that's the flip side of it, is people fret quite so much about balancing exact numbers and things because the game takes enough time to set up and play that you want to at least feel like it was totally fair. And the illusion there is that it's also to some extent a game where there's a lot of variance and things, so sometimes it's just going to go wrong anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
But, people like to exert control where they can. I completely understand that. I think, they need to get on top of their game a little bit more with communicating these changes. Like, as much as I understand selling digital versions of books and having them link into the app, whereas the physical books don't, it kind of needs to link up at this point. Yeah. They need to kind of commit to the rules of free thing to the extent that FAQ and War Scroll changes are reflected in the app, even if you don't know the General's Handbook. Because it's a small thing to give away, ultimately. And that's a bit fussy at the moment, like having to maintain a couple of different FAQs alongside the War Scrolls as written, alongside points changes and things like that is getting messy, which is a shame. But, like, they could easily change it. They just need to get a better app, basically.
Yeah, I think they said something about launching a database, like a fact database of some kind. We'll see what that looks like.
Yeah, I think just those FAQ changes need to be reflected in the PDFs, the rule PDFs that you download from the website. That's the simplest example, right? Yeah. Like if a unit like the Changeling, for example, which has been quite changed in the latest FAQ, the PDF you can download from the site at the time I'm saying this doesn't reflect the changes, and they're quite substantial changes.
Yeah.
So they need to just like. It's a manpower and a time thing, but it feels like those things need to be slicker, right? Like, you shouldn't be download 2 documents when you download them from the same place. Right. They say the same thing. Yeah. Like, you should just download 1, and that should be changed straight away, and that should be propagated out to the apps and so on. Yeah. But I think that's just, it's a lot better than it was. It's just still, as you say, a logistics heavy experience.
Well, that's where, I enjoy a good skirmish game, which is good news because Necromunda's coming back.
Yeah, shit. That was news item 1, by the way.
Yeah.
Of like 9.
We'll probably talk about the General's Handbook throughout, like, a lot.
Yeah, it'll come up again later because we played some AOS this month. But yeah, so that was one of this month's surprises. Is Necromunda is actually back.
Yeah. which is amazing. I've never played it. I was more time guy.
Yeah, so was I.
And I love more time so much, that the idea of a futuristic sort of variant, though I understand that the Necromunda rules are a bit more fiddly, perhaps.
Well, it's getting new rules. This is what's interesting,
okay, right.
is, so Necromunda is coming back, but this comes up hot on the heels of Shadow War.
Yeah.
So Necromunda is like Shadow War or Mordheim, a sort of gang level combat game set in a hive city, so a massive sort of mega arcology, a shit arcology, basically, in 40k universe, and you control in Necromunda like gangs, from various kind of like criminal sort of underground houses as they scrap for resources and experience and things. And everyone, like, it's beloved for various reasons, but, Shadow War was essentially the way of quickly bringing it back, because Shadow War, its rule set is basically identical to old Necromunda, but it's just that the theme is different. It's not, gangs, it's kill teams of 40k factions fighting. Because the notion is that, one Space Marine would probably kill like 3 different Necromunda gangs by himself. Like the power level is sufficiently reduced in Necromunda that it's basically ordinary people with guns.
Yes.
Compared to like super soldiers and things like, I've got 3 Harlequins for Shadow War, which is just like, that's like a hive worth of dead people, basically, like, in terms of the fiction. But, Shadow War was an efficient way of bringing Necromunda back, because it was just existing models, the old rules and a structure. And, I'm still looking forward to playing it. Like, it's a good idea. But now they're bringing back Necromunda with new models. So there are, there's definitely Escher and the one whose name I've forgotten, the big dudes.
Brawly dudes, yeah.
Brawly dudes. So ladies, 80s ladies and the brawly dudes.
Yes.
But yeah, which is good because that's a whole new set of female sculpts from GW, which is always nice to see. And more of them later as well. But reportedly it is also getting new rules. So it's a new Necromunda.
Fascinating.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's odd to have the announcement so close to after Shadow War. I think a lot of people can be confused by it. They're like, well, we thought this was new Necromunda. And now it's like, what is Necromunda? It's going to be that same old fantasy, but who knows, the rule set will be streamlined or changed in many ways.
Yeah, it's very exciting though.
Yeah, it's right. The models are so cool, and I hope they stick to the 80s, the very 80s sort of vibe that those
they seem to so far.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was thinking, they might approach it like Blood Bowl and have loads of Forge World, kind of tie-in stuff. Yeah.
Like Core Gang in plastic and then resin special characters and things. Yeah, that would make sense. I'm excited for it partly because I think there's loads of conversion potential in those models.
For sure.
Well, essentially it feels like getting all of the Chaos Cultist kits that you'll never otherwise have.
Right.
So cause the generic Chaos Cultist kit is just men in rags and gas masks and clubs and things.
Yeah, it's a really good kit.
It is a good kit, but it would be really nice to have a lot of other, basically just sort of themed humans from 40k, right? Those big brawly dudes would really naturally make good corn, corn aligned, Chaos Cultists. So there's loads of potential there. I don't know when, I don't know if that's an early next year or a later this year thing.
Yeah, they didn't give a time frame, did they?
No. Which, is good because I can't take on any more projects.
Hopefully it's next year. It would give me an excuse to buy some 40k scenery as well. Which is, I'd really like the new 40k scenery sets.
Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we still got Shadow War to play, so.
Yeah, it's true actually. Yeah.
So we should do that. We should get through at least one game of Shadow War before Necromunda comes out.
Yeah.
Speaking of small unit count games that do have release dates, Shadespire is out next month, which is the other piece of news. So when this was announced, people thought this might be new Mordheim. But it's not. It's more like Games Workshop trying to do X-Wing, which is interesting. So it is, I think we might have talked about it before. I'm pretty excited about it. It's, a small scale sort of skirmish game, but it's designed for competitive play. So it's, Age of Sigmar XCOM. It's played on a hex grid. You have a very small number of characters. So the 2 warbands that come with the box are 5 Blood Reavers and 3 Stormcast Liberators. And they are each unique characters with their own profiles, and you attach like upgrade cards to them. And then there are decks. You also build your half of the board. It's like part of your deck. And you like push your boards together to form the battlefield. So there's like strategic choice decision making there. I haven't played it yet. It's all custom dice and stuff, which is a very FFG thing. Like Games Workshop traditionally like D6s and FFG like custom dice. And this feels like GW doing an FFG, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It looks fantastic. The models are rad. And the rule set seems like really quick. The game's supposed to take about 15 minutes or 20 minutes.
To half an hour, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the idea is that you play like best of threes, and that's your kind of almost your match play equivalent of Shadespire. So that it's easy to see like pop-up tournaments happening very easily.
Yeah, well, they've announced organised play alongside it, which Games Workshop
fantastic.
don't do to the same extent that, for example, Fantasy Flight do, where they're like sending out kits and things, and there are tournaments happening that you can fit in an evening. Like a Warhammer Age of Sigmar 40k tournament is it's a weekend long deal.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. And that's out next month so it's out in September, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's an auto buy for me. I can't wait to.
Yeah, me too.
Can't wait to play it.
And that's basically the only thing I'm going to let myself buy while I get through existing projects.
Yeah.
But and that's also notable because, in so the models are really nice. They're push fit, models with sort of built-in scenery bases, which is a nice touch.
Yeah.
But in red and blue plastic. So if you're not a painter, you can kind of play out the box like a war game, like a board game basically, which is a really good choice, I think. But they're really dynamic models actually, despite being push fit.
Yeah, especially the Skellies. They're the first Death Rattle models we've seen for a long time, and they're really, really characterful.
It's the swaggiest skeleton ever seen.
They look so happy.
Big old cape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They look fantastic.
Yeah. It's a very swaggy skeleton. Those aren't until November, I think.
Of course, yeah. The box is a Khorne, isn't it? And
the box is Khorne and Stormcast.
The Stormcast models are lovely. Actually.
Yeah, and then the bolt-on warbands are coming later.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and then the Stormcast also, initially it was the first female Stormcast that anyone had ever seen. It's now not the first female Stormcast that's going to be out, which is interesting.
Yeah, just after Blight War.
Which is out next week.
Wow, yeah.
That
came around fast.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I mean. This is when the
news
news thing just doesn't stop rolling. So, Shadespire is out, and that has a female Stormcast Liberator in it, which is rad. They're doing that more now.
Yeah.
The other thing, God, there's so much news. The other thing is Blight War, which is the new, do you know if it's replacing the core set for Age of Sigmar?
I don't think so. It's like a £95 box, so it's almost like if you're well into AOS, then get this. Rather than a starter thing.
Well, that's interesting because, 40k has sort of 2 army start boxes that go from 95 quid down to 25 quid. And AOS had like 25, 50, 75, and it stopped there.
Yeah.
So now it goes all the way up to 95 quid. So they filled in the top end as well.
Yes.
While they've been at it.
Yeah. So it's a sizable force of Stormcast Vanguard, which is a lot of their newer models, including the chickens, what they called Paladors, Vanguard
Paladors.
I think they've got some long strikes in there, and they've got a rad new female Stormcast hero. I'm not sure what class she is.
She's a Knight Zephyros.
Zephyros, that's a new thing.
Yeah. Well, so the key with the Vanguard is to think of a wind thing.
yeah.
And then tie that to the word knight, and then add like a Y and pretend it's Latin.
So, Knight Zephyros, and she's got like 2 hand axes and a bolt pistol, I think. And she's just kind of like a skirmish hero, which is really, really cool. The model's amazing. Really good sort of head, like really kind of intense.
Yeah, she comes with 2.
Oh, really?
She has a mask and an unmasked head, and I really want the unmasked head.
Yes.
For a conversion.
Yeah, it'd be great.
I think it's going to be one of the hardest things to find.
That's the thing is like my favorite new Stormcast model in ages, and it's inside a £95 box. By design, one would expect. They're not going to be selling that independently anytime soon.
I don't think so, although they seem to be coy about the fact they might sell a Knight Zephyros separately.
Okay.
Like as a hero. Because she is a specific Knight Zephyros.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Called Neve Black Talon.
Yeah, so one of the first examples is them bringing back named characters into Age of Sigmar, because recently they released rules for Vander's Hammerhand, like he's just got different rules to a normal Lord Celestar on Dracoth. So that's a way of kind of, which I like. I do like that if you want your guy to be Vandus, you get something a little bit special in the rules that, sets him apart. But that's really cool. So you get the archetype and a hero kind of out of that rule set. Which is nice.
Yeah, she is supposed to be Sigmar's assassin. So she does double damage against heroes, I think.
Oh,
so
sweet.
But her maddest rule is, so you know the Ride the Winds Etheric ability that the Paladors have?
Yeah.
Which is basically, so the hench chocobos.
Yeah.
The ripped chocobos that they ride, can kind of enter a kind of basically hyperspace. They can run so fast they kind of enter magic wind and just come out somewhere else, which allows them to do these insane straight line run moves across the board. Her thing is she could basically slipstream behind them.
Oh, wow.
So if a unit enters the Winds of Theric within 6 inches of her, she can go with them. She can't do it by herself because she's on foot.
Yeah.
But she literally like, I can't imagine it in any other way except some sort of like Daytona USA. Like she gets in the slipstream, she gets the bonus and she's just like soaring along behind the battle, the battle chickens.
Or she's just hanging onto one of the tails.
Yeah, exactly.
As they're hurtling across the board. That's like a 4d6 move or something. It's insane.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So that will get her, like, that's a way of using that kind of, using the chickens as a skill shot.
As a slingshot, yeah.
To deliver an assassin to a hero, which is the most AOS thing ever.
Also not a sentence you thought you were going to say.
No, absolutely not. Everything in AOS is a bird did it. Like a bird is involved somewhere in the process. A bird did it.
Yeah. The other new model in that set that is not a bird, is a very big snail. Is an amazing model.
Yeah, I love it, yeah.
Which is, oh god, Slimux.
His name is Slimux, yeah.
Yeah, because Nurgle names are stupid. Yeah, the other half of the box is Nurgle demons, basically. All existing stuff like Plague Drones and Plague Bearers. Except, Horticulus Slimux, I think his name is, who is Nurgle's, he's the first Plague Bearer. And he's basically the farmer and gardener of Nurgle's garden.
Yeah. And
he is chewing a bone like a straw, like a piece of straw, riding a snail that is dragging a tiller behind it. So basically, functionally, that snail's a tractor.
It's a tractor. Yeah, I love it. He's got, there's so much character in the model, like the hero on the back of the snail, he's got like a little tree and a little kind of, he's got an assortment of little things that sort of speak to a life beyond war.
Yeah.
That these Nurglings enjoy in, Nurgle's garden, which is a really nice touch. It's really characterful. You could do loads to kind of add stuff to the back of the snail if you wanted your Slimux to be, if you're a big gardener, you could put loads of sort of disgusting flowers up there, loads of conversional potential for him.
Yeah,
It doesn't look like a warrior as well, which I like. He looks like, he's sort of admin.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a support role. He's a support snail,
Yeah. Yeah. He's
battlefield role.
He's also trying to eat a Nurgling that's being dangled on a fishing rod in front of him, which is his bait.
That's awesome.
It's such a good model.
Yeah.
And this is also, I feel a bit more for people who collect Nurgle because currently that £95 box is the only way to get essentially the new Nurgle Battle Tome because that's where their allegiance ability comes from.
Okay.
I think there's a rumor that a Nurgle Battle Tome is coming. It'll come separately. So maybe if you were trying to figure out what you were going to do with all that Stormcast, hold off a bit.
Yeah.
But this also sees Nurgle get their allegiance ability, and I really like it. It's super clever.
What does it do?
So, each of so this means Slaanesh got allegiance abilities in the General's Handbook. So all 4 Chaos Gods have them now. And I think they've done a really good job of expressing the personalities of those gods through these abilities. So to go through the existing ones, the new Slaanesh ones, you pick one of 3 based on what kind of Slaanesh army you have, because Slaanesh is missing. So you have like pretenders who are trying to take over from Slaanesh, and you have seekers that are looking for Slaanesh.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that kind of thing. And your ability reflects that, which is cool, but it feels like when Slaanesh comes back, there will be something on the scale of the Nurgle and Tzeentch and Khorne ones. Khorne's is like, you get points when stuff dies. And then you can spend those points for these big effects. So Khorne is all about collecting skulls, basically. Like, stuff has to die. It doesn't matter if it's your stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's their stuff. Khorne doesn't care, which is that thing they say all the time about Khorne.
Yeah.
It doesn't care from whence the blood flows. And that's really nicely reflected. Tzeentch is the Destiny dice where you roll 9 dice at the start of the game, and then you can use them throughout the game to swap out for other rolls, which is a mixture of chance and luck and manipulating fate. And it kind of works perfectly.
Yeah.
Nurgle's is a dial with 7 points on it.
Right.
And each of the points is a different buff, basically, but a different like stage of life, like decay and regrowth and things like that. And so that goes, and so that stuff like, so there are 7 points on the dial, and the 7th is like everything in the Nurgle army heals a wound, as they start to regrow.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the beginning of the cycle of life and death. And that includes stuff like all terrain starts emitting mortal wounds on enemies.
Oh, wow.
Like it just becomes pestilent.
Interesting.
And in some cases they like gain bonuses to charges, or they gain bonuses to wound rolls, but it feels like a different allegiance ability every time it rolls around. But the way it works is at the beginning of the game, you roll a dice, and that's where it starts. And that's why the healing one is the 7th, because it's the only one you can't get in the first turn.
Right.
Which makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah.
And whatever you roll is where you start. And then every turn from then onwards, you click it on. So it's very unlikely you're going to get all the way around the wheel in a game, because a game is usually like 4 or 5 turns.
Yeah.
So, you know, but I love the mix of like, obviously Nurgle kind of grows and spreads and changes, but also you kind of have to accept your lot a bit, which is kind of the Nurgle thing, right? It's like, well, this is happening. Like, you might want the healing thing, but if you roll a 2, you're probably not going to get there by the end of the game. But you have to go with what you do get, which is going to be something else.
That's great.
It's really good. And you can do it without, the Blightwall box comes with like a widget, like a dial, basically, that you can turn to like represent where you're getting, which they're doing more of that kind of thing. You don't need that. You just need to track from where you start on the list, but it's super cool.
That's really, really cool. I like the shifted focus from, because it's all been Stormcast Khorne since the beginning, and going to like Stormcast Vanguard against Nurgle. And some of the best books have been about Nurgle fighting Stormcast, actually. Yeah. So it's cool for them to bring that back into the models.
This is also a bit of a story advance, because the Blight War is what follows the Realmgate Wars.
Right.
So, essentially, because the 2 realms that were kind of successfully, not taken back fully, but like reclaimed for good after the Realmgate Wars, where everything belonged to Chaos, were Life and Fire, which is where Khorne and Nurgle were, respectively, or the other way around. And so in response, like Nurgle has sent a man on a snail to create new kind of branches of the Garden of Nurgle everywhere, to go for all of the realms, not just the Realm of Life, because he's been booted out of the Realm of Life, or is in the process of being booted out of it. Yeah. And he's sort of appearing everywhere, like seeding this, pestilence and disease. And Sigmar has sent his assassin to take him out, which is kind of, that's the setup. And I think there are scenarios in the book that comes with the set, which are designed to kind of play that through as a little mini campaign. But yeah, so that's, and this has been nice as well, because this is the first new AOS after what has felt like a lot of very 40k.
Yeah, it was always understandable that 40k was going to swamp things for a little bit, but actually it hasn't been as egregious as I thought. To come back with like new AOS stuff, like an entire box game next month as well, is pretty amazing.
And that's not the only new AOS thing, because there's also Firestorm.
Yeah, which sounds really exciting.
Which is a map campaign system for playing out campaigns between cities, like the cities that have now been established in the realms of fire and life. And this is interesting because this is also no new models yet. It's mostly just like a supplement, but it is going to be accompanied by new box sets, armies in a box, which are interesting because they're all order. They're all good guys. There's one for each city, and they're all mixed in some interesting way. So they're very much like narrative play armies. Like they're not really for you if you want the foundation of a matched play, fully legal army. Yeah. But it's always a mixture of Stormcast and one other faction. And they've dug a lot into the old world model range. So there's one city that is like old Dark Elves and, Stormcast. There's one city that's dwarves and Stormcast, and there's one city that is like old Empire, Human Free Guild and Stormcast. Yeah. But it's nice to see them, because they've put a lot of that stuff on the Twitch channel, like showing off people's armies that have mixed old units and new ones in a particular way. But it feels like they're really kind of embracing that now and trying to encourage people to build these sort of themed armies.
Yeah, really nice. Yeah, they look really cool. Is it a book? Cause I kind of got the impression it's almost like a grand strategy map campaign, basically, where you can build bases and stuff like that. And, it's sort of like persistence to it. So you structure your campaigns over fighting for territory while you're trying to achieve objectives and build things and break each other's strongholds down. Because there are now rules for siege warfare in AOS as well, courtesy of General's Handbook. So that's really exciting. I mean, in the ideal world, I'd love like a box with a bunch of cardboard in it that actually let you build a map and kind of put counters down and stuff to actually reflect who owns what and where you've built stuff. But
I'd like that as well.
Just make it yourself, I suppose.
I think that would get me, I'm thinking about this anyway, but that would get me moving into doing more Mortals and sort of Slaves to Darkness stuff to go at my Tzeentch. Yeah. Because at the moment, I don't like demons don't build bases. Like, I basically, like, my current army is essentially the weather.
Right. Yeah, it's just a force of nature.
There are phenomena that happens that you have to deal with. I mean, bad phenomena, but nonetheless. But yeah, like that's, and this as well is them responding, I think, to the criticism that the AOS setting wasn't particularly grounded. Like, you didn't know where normal people lived, because normal people didn't really. Yeah. And now they're kind of, you can imagine that the cities like Harrowguild that they're establishing, and Hammerhall, maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now will be the first Like, you know, we'll have the state, maybe, you know, providing that everything's a success and things continue kind of as they have been, we'll have the status that something like Fenris or Cadia has in 40K, like a place that has been around forever and that people kind of have all this story invested in. That's just starting now, which is kind of cool to see.
Yeah, you've got to start somewhere. And I like the idea of, isn't one of the cities kind of in two realms at once? It's kind of two,
Hammer Hall.
Hammer Hall. So there are two kind of incarnations of it as it kind of stretches across realms, which is a great way of using the AOS's high fantasy setting to create new kind of city environments.
Yeah, there's a gate in the middle of the city and one half is in the realm of fire and that's where all the forges and things are. And then the other half is in the realm of life and that's where all the farms are.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Completely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, you know, well, basically the realm of industry and the realm of gentrification.
Never shall they meet.
It's interesting because this is, to return briefly to things that have changed, like the other big change that we didn't mention is they made sweeping changes to what were called, kind of compendium armies, which were big PDFs full of rules for old, often discontinued models like Tomb Kings and Bretonnians and things like that. That stuff was hit extremely hard in the most recent set of changes to the extent that a lot of them can't really be used anymore and a lot of them are gone.
Right.
So one change that they've made, even as they're bringing back name characters in the form of new characters, is they've essentially removed all of the old name characters from the game at once. So, you know, for example, like, Luon Leonka, who's the king of Bretonnia, had rules in AOS. Even though he's been dead for like 1 billion years. They initially did some hand wavy stuff, like some souls reoccur through time, maybe. Who knows why this is happening? Please don't be mad at us for discontinuing this range. Here's some rules. What they've now done is said, he is now a generic king. Yeah. He's a king on a horse now. He's not this guy. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that I think they wanted to move the game forward, and obviously that, you know, kind of sucks if that's all you ever wanted, but, you know, if it was old Warhammer, but they moved it forward and for better or worse. The other thing is that I think some of those old War Scrolls from discontinued ranges were a little bit overtuned because they're from early days of Age of Sigmar. Right. So I think the examples of that, I don't know enough about I'm basically just repeating things smarter than people may have said, but if it's useful for people to have a sense of why these discussions happen and why people are happy or sad about this, like I think Cetra, who's one of the old characters, was super powerful in AOS and just gone.
Okay.
Which, well, you can use the model, but it now represents something generic.
Yeah.
And so that's a big change. So it's interesting to see on one side, they are pushing people away from the discontinued ranges like Tomb Kings, like Bretonnians. But on the other, they're starting to repackage things like Empire models and giving them a new identity. So it does feel a bit giveth, taketh away. Like if you've got the right things and you want to roll with it, you're probably all good. And there's still nothing stopping you using your Bretonnians in, you know, the games you want to use them in at a casual level.
Yeah.
But again, I think it feels like a couple of different things. One, obviously they have a business incentive to push people towards the new models and the stuff they're currently selling. But also, again, from a kind of negative sort of, you know, play experience standpoint, people were buying Tomb King armies on eBay because they all win tournaments. Because the rules they do have were really good. That probably isn't a good state for the game to be in if one of the things that you should be going and, you know, kind of buying to increase your tournament odds doesn't even get sold by Games Workshop anymore.
Yeah, I guess it does count to the secondary market, doesn't it, for all those old models? And actually, if you want to buy an army, you've got to buy it, and
it's got to be the stuff they actually sell.
Yeah, something they actually make.
Which is, so interesting. But the Firestorm stuff is also exciting. So would you believe it, Tom? We haven't gotten through all the news yet because we haven't.
Jesus.
We can probably rattle through a little bit the rest of it quickly because it's going to affect us a little bit less, but it will link into kind of what we've been up to. So mentioned earlier that Shadespire is, feels like GW doing a Fantasy Flight game, down to custom dice and the scale of it, and it's cardboard tokens and cards, which is something GW have only just started dabbling in. While this is happening, this month, Fantasy Flight, announced Star Wars Legion, which is as close as they have ever gotten to doing 40k. Basically, this is a infantry combat miniatures game at 40k scale, so 28mm models, heroes, full squads of units. They already have Imperial Assault, which is played competitively, but it's either an RPG sort of thing. Like basically, it's kind of both Silver Tower and a skirmish game at the same time. And they have X-Wing and Armada, obviously, but they didn't have anything specifically like this. Also, unusually for Fantasy Flight until Rune Wars, it's multi-part kits, it's multi-pose kits. Right. And they're not pre-painted. So, like, they're doing a Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
which is, and it's by, it's by Alex Davey, who is one of the designers on X-Wing, not the designer of X-Wing originally, but he's one of the people who came in sort of midway through its life, or a couple of years into its life, and has been, I met him once. He's a nice dude.
Oh, lovely.
He used to be a games journalist, I think.
No, really?
Or he used to be a journalist. I don't know exactly what kind of, but yeah, there you go. There is hope. But yeah, and so obviously this is, you know, it's not out till later this year, but it's an interesting, one interesting development for them to be entering that. I guess my question is, do you think you would ever be drawn away from GW for this kind of thing?
I think it depends a lot on the models.
Yeah.
I love the idea of a Star Wars sort of war game. That's an amazing idea. And it's sort of, you know, recreating Hoth with little miniatures is an awesome thing. But if the minis aren't very good, then
they're okay.
Okay.
Yeah, they're better. I think Fantasy Flight are getting better. I'll show you some pictures after we do this. But yeah, they're getting better, but they don't feel as good as they're not as good as GW. But at the same time, I think they're maybe a little bit more limited in what they can do with Star Wars.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, they can't do a huge amount with the scale. I mean, the Star Wars universe is so, like, go onto Wikipedia, you're going to get, like, tiny, granular micro information about every fucking fruit in that universe, you know, let alone every war machine. Like, it's all so kind of nailed down. Yeah. That I wonder if it would be quite difficult to write rules for that would actually kind of sync up with.
I think they'll be okay from a rules point of view. I think from a models point of view, it's interesting because everything in Star Wars, and obviously they want to be faithful to the look, obviously. Yeah. But everything in Star Wars was designed to be worn by a person in a film and for it to not look shit. Everything in basically, and it's interesting because it's, you know, evolution thing. Everything in 40K is designed to evoke the feeling of something like Star Wars while looking good on a miniature. If you put it on a human, it would look stupid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they can't suddenly give, you know, Star Wars stormtroopers gigantic shoulder pads and massive heads and tiny little legs, so they're all torso all the time, like a space marine. Like, they're going to be human scale. Like, rebels are just going to be people in hats, right?
Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting challenge to paint up some just ordinary humans. I think if I was going to do it, I'd look to like a military, probably like a Second World War level. Yeah. I would probably prefer to paint that stuff up because there is a kind of historical accuracy to it that would be interesting.
So there's a mechanic, I don't know too much about the mechanics. It does use some templates and things like X-Wing, and it has upgrade cards and squad cards like X-Wing. So it's sort of a hybrid. But there's a rule I think about activations and like how it does activations in terms of like, you pick what you'd like to do, but then each of you determine what happens in what order in a particular way. That sounded a bit like Bolt Action to me, which is not a game I play a lot of. Right. But shout out to Fienia from Discord. He plays it, and I've seen him, you know, talk about it and play it in at UK Games Expo, so I know a little bit about how it works. And that made it click in my head that I actually see this more like a historical war game than something like 40K, which is an outright fantasy. From both the perspective of how you would paint it, because you're painting humans wearing, you know, wearing khaki, but also actually from the kind of the attitude you take towards it, which is, at least for me, like I'm a big Star Wars purist. Like if I was to pick this up, I'd want to paint it right. Like you've got maybe a few options with the Rebels, like you could theme them after Hoth or Return of the Jedi or the guys from Rogue One and go for the color schemes. There are multiple versions of like olive drab you can do for them. But Stormtroopers are Stormtroopers, right? Like, obviously, I understand there's going to be a tournament scene for this game, and people are going to show up with their orange Stormtroopers, you know, and in their kind of custom style. Yeah. But, like, I just couldn't be able to bring myself to do that. Like, this would be you know, I like to go with the lore a bit in Games Workshop as it is, and that's a setting that's designed to let you customize it. Star Wars isn't.
No, that's very true.
Like, you know, the starter kit is sort of stormtroopers, and you get like bikes and stuff, and then you get rebels and a little mini rebel walker, which looks quite cool, and Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Oh, cool. Like, you are not going to do your Darth Vader, sure. Well, someone obviously will. I'm not, right? Yeah, like, I'm not going to be like, and this is my take on this character. Like, no, there is one take on that character. It's like, it's a, you know, and it's similar to the attitude of like, I collect, you know, I don't know, this particular US Army regiment, so I'm going to get everything about it right. Which is similar. I mean, people do take that attitude to 40K with getting company markings and things, correct? But true. It feels like there's a sort of a gradient, and I'm surprised by, for me, how far Star Wars falls down on this is a historical event. It actually happened, and you have to respect that end of the spectrum.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. I mean, it's because so many games have been made about Star Wars since, or so much has been written, so much fan fiction has been, not fan fiction, but, you know, actual spin-off fiction has clarified so much of that universe that, you know, how 40K has been around for sort of 30 years, and it's that time that has kind of created this enormous like cathedral of fiction, and Star Wars is an equivalent in terms of that. It's, you know, the detail that's gone into building that universe over time.
I think it is, although one of my concerns about this is that, actually, like, 40k has way more, 40k is interesting because 40k's fiction was built around its combat system to some extent.
Yeah.
So obviously things get fudged in the books, things happen that would be pretty difficult to simulate in the game. But fundamentally, they love dropping units from the game into the books, doing approximately the thing they do in the game. And there's actually, I think there are basically legal reasons for that now as well. Like a lot of the lawsuits that Games Workshop's had to fight over the last 10 years, against copycat miniatures manufacturers and things.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Chapter House stuff, where they were basically making Games Workshop miniatures, and calling them Games Workshop names. Like you get a lot of people like third parties who make whatever. But call it like, you know, Orc Lad rather than Boy or something like that.
Okay.
But I think it's Chapter House who were just making full on 40k stuff. And one of the rulings, one of the ways that shook out is that if, you know, GW suggest the existence of a miniature but don't make it, they have no rights to that. Like that essentially a story or a piece of art don't count as having IP for that.
Right.
So if they, so you'll notice this, and you can trace this if you look at the history of any art for 40k or Age of Sigmar. It used to be that there were pictures of units that didn't exist as models. Now, they do not. They do not do that at all. If you look at any of the art in the new 40k book, everything is a model, and it's really close to the pose it's actually in, the model. Like they're, like, my desktop wallpaper, on my PC is the cover of the Disciples of Tzeentch book. And I had it on my desktop because I've been working through that and it's kind of inspiration. But I keep looking at it and realizing that like the Lord of Change that looks like it's a very dramatic thing, it's just a picture of the model. Like it's a great painting, but it's a painting of the specific model. Yeah. And that's because GW have got a lot more exact about making sure that they don't give anyone the chance to beat them to making something by suggesting this isn't something in a piece of art.
That's interesting.
That was a little bit of a tangent, an interesting tangent. But the reason I bring it up is because everything from that universe and the fiction and the art and stuff that surrounds Games Workshop's universes stems from ultimately the sort of dice rolling combat system and the way units feel and the way they fight. Star Wars doesn't work like that at all. In fact, basically, combat in Star Wars is entirely narrative driven and basically not at all technology or logic driven. There, you know, and this is, I think, is a battle that gets lost a lot of the time by the expanded universe stuff in the games. And you can see this if you ever played a Star Wars video game where a lightsaber does like 20 hit points worth of damage rather than winning, then you've kind of encountered this, right? Like, you hit it a lot with the Star Wars pen and paper role-playing game, which I play, which is another Fantasy Flight thing. Yeah. Where there are these granular rules for like how much damage a blaster bolt does to a stormtrooper under these circumstances. And if you get this result on the critical hit table, maybe he drops his blaster. And it, like, I played it that way for a while, but it doesn't really work because it doesn't feel like Star Wars. Because, again, something of demons being like weather, stormtroopers in Star Wars are weather. They show up, you shoot into them for a while, and some of them fall over. But it's not about them. It's about the heroes who are running away and running and shooting and having their own adventure and trying to achieve their own objective. Yeah. So in the RPG, I kind of fixed that by just, like, basically, as a GM, just fudging it. Like, you know, putting the players in some meaningful danger, having the shots come back, but not worrying too much. Like almost getting rid of the concept of hit points for stormtroopers. It's like, you fired, you hit, one stormtrooper falls down. There's another one behind him. Like, and that felt much better. The issue they face with the war game is they suddenly have to really apply logic to that. They have to establish, like, how many stormtroopers is equal to how many rebels? What kind of gear do they have? The only thing that comes close to this in the films is Rogue One, like the big ground battle in Rogue One. Because everything else moves forwards and backwards based purely, essentially on a kind of just sort of the whim of what the movie needs. Like this opening set for that game, for Legion, seems to be themed around the Battle of Endor, but the ground battle somewhat. I mean, Luke is there, but whatever. Like, it's got the speeder bikes and scout troopers and stuff. But like, at what point do the rebels roll a dice to see if the Ewoks show up? You know what I mean? En masse and inexplicably win. You know what I mean? It's an interesting problem.
Yeah, that is very interesting. The concept of painting up Ewoks fills me with dread. So
I think they would dry brush very easily.
I think they would actually.
You just wash them, dip them, wash them.
Just
dry brush the shit
stick
out
loads
of
of tufts on them, like the sort of basing tufts that you get. You know, that's basically an Ewok, almost an Ewok already, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's one of those. Put some eyes on it.
Yeah, they're fine. Just big little fairy bolts. Yeah, it'd be fine. Just flocking an Ewok.
And I think it's not a bad fit for miniatures game, but I think I'm so invested in AOS now that I probably wouldn't be tempted by a different.
Yeah, like it is, you know, it'll tickle my brain a bit, but I don't know if I don't think I can take on another project, but also like, I mean, I just want to see what they, you know, I want to see what it's like really. It's a demo game kind of experience.
Yeah.
And as a man who's had 2 terrible demo games of Rune Wars, yet to have been totally convinced about FFG's war games, but I think in both cases that was because of the demo, not the game.
Okay.
But that's, yeah.
Interesting.
My demo of, Rune Wars at Games Expo a couple of months back was given by the man who least wanted to be there on planet Earth, who was having an argument about 40k at the same time.
Really?
Yeah, with someone else, which is kind of
awkward.
A bit of a mad, awkward way of experience. Like probably the worst way to play a war game.
Yeah.
What if you took the arguments from 40k and combined it with the disaffectedness of someone who's been doing their job for a weekend and is really given up now. So that wasn't great. So I don't want to judge Rune Wars based on purely on that. Given I already said that, I did previously judge Rune Wars, so on this podcast, but yeah. So that's happening. There's a new wave of X-Wing spaceships coming, which is a thing that happens. That is also like weather. Stuff that's like weather. I did want to, as an aside, we appreciate that predominantly a Games Workshop pod, but I did want to say that this month I think I've gotten over my X-Wing slump a bit.
Oh, good.
And that stems to a discussion from earlier, which is I realized that I think something has happened to the game that's similar to what's happened in others to some extent. It's desperately waiting for an FAQ still, but I don't have to play with that in mind. I can still go to the pub or a shop and play with friends at a kind of regular level. I'm going to Nationals in a couple of weeks. By the time we record the next X-Wing, next Miniatures Month, I will have done X-Wing Nationals. Like, I don't have to engage with that level. Like, I still love the game for its systems. Like, I built a new list, which is based on some of the new upgrades they've added, but it basically allowed me to create an all new movie X-Wing squadron with Poe Dameron and Snap and Jess, who are his wingmen in that film.
Oh, right.
And it's themed around that moment in the movie where they fly over the water and Poe says, fly straight, you know, don't fly straight at them. Don't let these thugs scare you. I've literally built a list that wants to fly straight at people because the way it mitigates damage and it shouldn't let thugs scare it. And, you know, Jess Pavo replies to Poe in that moment by saying, we're with you. And like, that's kind of the theme of this because there's synergies and kind of things. And I built something that feels super themey for me, which is really important. It's quite competitive. And when it flies well, when it does its thing, it feels like you're flying X-Wings again. Which sounds like a stupid thing to say if you don't play the game X-Wing, but it's become so much about huge turrets that do massive amounts of damage at range and bombs that you can't avoid and similar to, you know, Mortal Wound spam, right? Like it's similar to sort of 40k AOS style Alpha Strike lists where they just blast you off the table straight away and it doesn't, you know, it's all about minimizing variance to an extreme degree. And that includes the variance that naturally comes with setting dials for ships, which is the core mechanic of the game. Even that has too much room for error for a hugely competitive list. So you need to make something that basically flies itself to some extent and does damage automatically, which I was so tired of that. But then I realized I don't have to play that. And getting back into a list that I really love and playing actual dogfights with other aces and interesting other lists was like, yeah, this is fucking great. This is still such a good game. And actually what it took for me weirdly was a little bit of that injection of that, attitude that I've now taken to Warhammer, which is I'm here for the feeling of it and the story, not the win. Yeah. Right. I don't want to resolve broken rules at each other until someone wins. I want to play a game where cool things happen. Yeah, yeah. So that's been
just below that top level though. You get that. Like you get that it's competitive, but really exciting.
Basically my lesson, my internal, my deep truth here is I've come to own my own mediocrity in a way that is, very redemptive.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. Speaking of owning the thing that's wrong with you, there's loads of new Nurgle models coming out. We're basically getting to the end of our hour plus of pure news. Yeah. But yeah, this is crazy. So I guess to rattle through the 40k stuff quickly, which I haven't really touched on it, they've now revealed the rest of the Death Guard range. So as people expected, Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard, plus Typhus and Death Guard Death Shroud Terminators, and a big fat tank with a mortar on it, and multi-pose Plague Marines, and loads of that stuff.
Nice.
It's really, like, the Mortarion model is massive, as you'd expect. Yeah. He's a big boy.
He's enormous. Is he as big as Lord of Change? He looks big.
Bigger? Yeah. I think. He's Magnus-sized.
God, that is big.
Yeah.
Demon Primarch though.
Yeah, that's the thing. You fall, you get real big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've almost at the end of the Dark Imperium book, which, I went off for ages, but actually the final quarter of it's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's almost like the story starts the last third of that book, which is a problem for it. But it's introducing Mortarion and his relationship with Nurgle, which is more complicated than, well, it should be quite complicated.
He hates it, basically.
He does pretty much hate it. It's also like the greater demons of Nurgle, like some of them think he's just basically like a totem that Nurgle's nicked to make fun of the Emperor, and some of them actually treat him with respect. And it's an interesting, Chaos is so interesting. Like they're so fractious and so at each other's throats all the time. It's really good. It's really good medium for books and for fiction.
Yeah, I really love the way they kind of. Have you finished that book?
Nearly at the end of it.
Right. So you will have seen like what it looks like when Nurgle fucks up a planet.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just, it's horrible.
It's disgusting. Yeah. I was like, really nicely written bits about, giant whales flying out of Nurgle's realm and then just sort of collapsing.
Splattering on the ground.
Because like, the magic doesn't hold outside of that realm, and they land and kind of erupt into these hordes of
isn't
Nurgles.
it because there are space whales in 40k anyway.
Yeah.
Isn't it a Nurgle corrupted space whale that gets
yes.
vomited back out of the Garden of Nurgle but can't exist in a normal atmosphere anymore? So it just sort of molts itself inside out as soon as it touches the atmosphere, and it's full of plague bearers.
Yeah, and it collapses and they splat open and explode and loads of great demons come out. It's fucking disgusting.
It's extremely
It's
extra.
really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to see Nurgle coming back for that good, disgusting, gross stuff.
Yeah. And then, so that's the next codex, I think. Codex Adeptus Mechanicus,
Oh yeah.
which is cool.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to collect Admech. I just want to get around to painting up my guys for, Shadow War. But they're kind of like, I don't know how to use them in the game because they don't have any transports and they're super squishy, like the normal humans. So if I can envision just charging them across the tabletop and they just get nuked by a mortar or, killed by a plane. So I'm kind of holding off collecting them at the moment until I can figure out like, I might just buy some Castellan robots and some of the cooler models just to paint them up, but I'm not sure like I'll build an army out of them.
It's interesting to, have you, like, the sort of the way this is progressing, because there's lots of, I think Thousand Suns is coming next, and then, which I'll pick up, I think.
Yeah.
And then, cause I picked up, Codex Space Marines came out in the time since we did.
Yeah, you got that. Got that over there.
That book's great. But yeah, so Thousand Suns is coming, and then, the rumor is that the other Codex Space Marines for Blood Angels, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves will all come out at the same time.
Oh well.
Which feels like a bit of, like, towards the end of the year, like it's a kind of Christmas stunt, which I could see them doing, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it feels like 40k is sort of settling into gear now. It's kind of plodding along. They're doing some interesting things that I'm kind of like, so by this point, since, if you're relying on us for all of your 40k news, then, the Primaris range is now fully out. They have the multi-pose kits for everything that was a mono-pose kit in the core set. It's out. But, and I'm really glad they're doing this, they're also releasing 5-man squad versions of the Intercessors and Hellblasters and things.
Oh, good.
Because they were being sold in boxes of 10,
Yeah.
which is 2 squads, but they're also selling boxes of 5, which that kind of flexibility is really what I wanted. I don't know if those are multi-pose kits, but that flexibility is really what I wanted GW to start doing, to accept that you don't always want the big box full of stuff. And like they're scaling the starter kits to start scaling the box, the individual units from like, I just want 1 to I want 10 and I want all of the bits. And having that scale there is such a good idea.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, painted up some Primaris this month.
We should move on to that, because we should move on to what we've been up to.
Yeah,
and
is that all the news? There's probably more.
One
of those.
We'll be fine. Fine. That's all of the actual new things. We talk about Armies on Parade next month.
Sure. Yeah. So this month I've been painting up some Primaris. Finally, right after, like the day after we recorded our last Miniatures Monthly podcast, I decided to paint them up as Iron Hands, who are the kind of transhuman chapter who like to, they're slightly heretical and they like to replace limbs with bionic limbs and improve themselves technologically.
What made you pick Iron Hands?
Because the story of the kind of sector that I described last time involved like a Mechanicus Forge world that's been cut off mostly from the rest of the Imperium. And I just like the idea of the kind of transhuman worshippers of mechanical improvement would kind of sync up in some way. That you'd have Primaris Space Marines who are almost dangerously obsessed with improving themselves, and they don't believe in the Omnissiah, which is what the Mechanicus believe in, but they kind of, their beliefs sync up so closely that
Iron Hands do, don't they?
Sorry?
Iron Hands do, don't they?
Oh, they might do actually.
Yeah, well, so
Certainly
I
they're
can drop some lore facts from Codex Space Marines, which has a lot of lore in it. This might flesh out your
Excellent.
thing a bit. So the Iron Hands send some of their own to Forge Worlds, to Forge Fanes, to learn from the Mechanicus and to kind of become like sort of dual worshippers of the Omnissiah and the Emperor. Yeah. So that could be a reason you have stranded Primaris. Like they were there training or learning, and now they're stuck.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, that's awesome. They've also got like a very simple color scheme, which is just black and silver. And I sort of like they don't look finished if you just do them black and silver. So they tend to have like white guns, but I've added some like dark red pop colours as well to make them actually look as though they're completed units. And it was interesting painting black.
I know you just said popped colours, but I heard popped collars, and I was it's like,
man, they're so fucking.
Those are all wearing Jack Wills.
It was interesting painting black because the Primaris have loads of edges to highlight, edge highlighting forever, basically. And you have to be really aggressive with it, but careful with black, because if you do too much like edge highlighting, it can look grey rather than black. So it was really interesting kind of trying to get that balance right. I think it's come off, but it was a lot of edge highlighting and harder than I thought it would be, actually. I thought black would be just really easy, and it's a little bit harder because like you want the consistency of the paint to be really good, because there's nothing else your eye is picking up on. It's just black. And it's like, to what extent do you want it to have a sheen or kind of be glossy at all?
Yeah, it becomes material. It's not just the colour, it's the material you're trying to create. Evoke is a really big difference as well.
Yeah, and when something's just red, it's the colour of red you're looking at. It's not the actual kind of texture of the paint necessarily the same way. So the other thing is, I bought a sheet of transfers from Forge World for Iron Hand stuff. And I'm too scared to do it. I'd say I haven't done transfers before, so I'm going to have to like do some test ones with it.
Do you have the Microset and Microsol stuff?
No, not yet.
Do you want to borrow mine?
Oh yeah, that'd be
you
great.
Can totally just take it home with you today.
Yeah.
Because
that would help
I can, I'll totally just show you how to use them before you go.
Yeah,
because like
right.
I've done a lot of Thousand Suns transfers.
Yeah.
I need it back eventually, but for now I'm all right.
I've got like a load of Stormcast ones, and transfers just don't seem silly for Stormcast to me. Like the idea of like a really perfectly painted lightning bolt, like as though it's been machine created. That's the kind of look that transfers have for
me. I use transfers on stuff where they might have used a transfer in real life. I don't know if maybe Thousand Suns runes don't count, but like it would have been machine stamped onto the thing, right? Yeah,
precisely, which is the look that you get. So it's never made sense for me in AOS, but I really like the idea of having the proper markings. The Iron Hands markings are really cool, actually. They tend to be like a mixture of Space Marine and Mechanicus kind of imagery. And I think once those are on, they're going to look kind of badass, actually. They already do. Just the posing on the Primaris Intercessors, I absolutely love it. I mean, we discussed before that sense of kind of poise, and like about to move into action. And when you actually see them assembled next to kind of a general, they look brilliant.
Yeah, I love those models.
So yeah, that's been my exciting project this month. I'm mostly procrastinating because I've got a Star Drake to paint. That's really the only reason.
Have you gotten that kind of hobby paralysis thing?
Yeah, I was just like,
it feels like that one decision about what colour that Star Drake's going to be has actually shut down.
It has shut down my hobby for the last month. It really has.
It's like somewhere in like the Extremis chamber where the Star Drakes are yielded into action by Sigmar's storm men. They've just got, which colour is this one going to be, Grimnir? I don't know.
Give me another 50 years and I'll come up with it. So it's going to be some kind of turquoisey green, basically. What type, I don't know. I still have to do some more colour tests on it. Once that's painted up, because I've got some chickens to paint. Paladors to paint. I've got,
you're gonna get chicken colour paralysis next.
Yeah, I am. I already have it. That's the trouble. It's like, this is the second layer of indecision behind the current layer of indecision I'm actually in. I don't know what I'm going to do with those birds. And I kind of want to get away from just painting them the way the boxes have them. Because I feel like, especially painting Stormcast, and they're all gold and blue like the original ones. I felt like, I've lost a bit of hobby in kind of creating a faction.
I like the variation you do have, though. Like you've got the white prosecutors and the silver retributors and stuff.
Yeah,
they still look like Hammers of Sigmar, but they're yours.
Yeah, I really like the Relictor as well. I was really happy that I went with black for him, and he doesn't even have any blue on him. Actually, I was just kind of like hoping that he would look as though he fits.
It's kind of weirdly, he's a little bit like a Space Marine chaplain, where they don't necessarily wear all of their chapter colours.
Yeah, and the fluff is actually that they go in and get their own armour from a special chamber, and no one knows what happens in there, but it's a different type of armor. It's the thing that every other Stormcast wears. It's not even Retributor armor. It's its own thing. And that's why they have like 3+ save and remove 4 inches rather than, it's all reflected in the rules. It's quite nice. But yeah, so that paralysis has stopped me. I've painted the same Stardrake head over and over again in so many different schemes now, and I haven't been happy with any of them. So yeah, it's a disaster. I've still got some more Judicates to paint. I've got the amazing Aquila General, Vanguard General model
the
to
Knight
paint.
Aquila, yeah.
Knight Aquila.
No, Lord Aquila.
Lord Aquila, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing model as well. But again, the chicken's got to be the right colour. I'm completely stuck. Completely stuck.
Yeah, but the Iron Hand stuff sounds exciting.
Yeah, they look rad, and I'm hoping they look good against, when they're stood next to Admech.
We should totally try and play some 40k ahead of the next thing, because I've got a Demon Army, but also, it's 40k's 30th birthday in September.
Oh, wow.
Which is weird, which means I'm 1 month older than 40k.
That's rad. Yeah, we definitely should, because I've still got all those, Space Wolves from Prospero, so I could put a Space Marine army together.
Yeah, totally. I'll throw some demons at you.
Nice. Like it.
So yeah, I thought I had settled on a Space Marine chapter for my Primaris.
Oh yeah,
I thought I had, and I told you I had.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I have. So the reason for this is I thought I had settled on Salamanders.
Yeah.
And the reasoning for this, because neither of us had decided when we last spoke, is I like Salamanders as kind of, they stand out a bit for being quite good.
Yeah.
They're quite nice, really, by Space Marine standards.
Relatively,
it's weird, because their whole thing is setting stuff on fire. But strangely enough, that's like, they do it in a much kinder way than most Space Marines do almost anything. Whereas where you get like the far other extreme end of the spectrum is like the Black Templars, who are basically assholes.
Yeah, yeah.
And then every other Space Marine is somewhere in the middle. Salamanders, like, they have like they don't, not a codex, not a full codex chapter. They kind of maintain this strong connection to their home world because they were so badly devastated during the Horus Heresy that there aren't very many of them. They're encouraged to kind of go and live with their families when they're not being Salamanders.
Well,
like not for any length of time, because the time scale is kind of off if you're a Space Marine, like you're off on crusade for 100 years.
Yeah.
But they go back and become like elders of their communities and things. And I really like the idea of, so I came up with a plot I really like, but it's not something I don't know if I'm going to do anything with in terms of a miniatures army. We'll see, which is, because I wanted something, because I really like, what you've done by having, a planet, which is the sort of core of your army.
Everything stems from that. Yeah.
This trapped, lost world. And I came up with this idea that kind of what I wanted to do is, it's interesting to me that I think there are some, even in the new book, which is great, like the first half of Codex Space Marines is just lots and lots of fiction and great art and stuff. And that was kind of nice to go through. And a lot of it is bringing the Primaris into that universe and making them fit as part of that universe, which the novel does as well. We've spoken about that before. But I still think that some of the interesting drama of 40k now is like where the Primaris come in for different chapters.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about collecting Blood Ravens from Dawn of War because I'm 90% sure they're a Thousand Sons successor chapter, a Loyalist Thousand Sons, which would be very me. A bit bored of red, not gonna lie, but nonetheless. But I can't quite square away Primaris Blood Ravens with myself at the moment.
Right.
Because it's weird to me that they exist so Primaris are made from like even a purer version of the original Primarch's gene seed than regular Marines.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how you can, even if their Primarch isn't Magnus, I don't know how they can make new ones if they don't know which Primarch it is.
Yeah.
And that is a stupid lore thing to get caught up on, but I care about this stuff and I kind of want it to be right. So either Belisarius Cawl is secretly making Marines with Magnus's gene seed, which would be a great
possible,
twist, but they kind of need to reveal it.
Yeah.
And those guys would probably be, actually they wouldn't necessarily be red because the rest of the Thousand Sons aren't red, but whatever, right? Or they're kind of giving the Blood Ravens just like Guilliman knockoffs. like they've just painted Guilliman red and sort of like, and so that for me was like a lore speed bump that I couldn't quite hit. The thing with Salamanders is like they have a recruitment process, which is they start a lot younger than other Marines. They start when people are like 7 and they train them as blacksmiths and then they initiate them as Astartes. And they encourage these kinds of, like bonds and things. And Salamanders are from Nocturne. This is going to turn to lore minutes, but people like lore. It's fine. So Nocturne is like a volcanic mega world covered in salamanders, like as in the lizards, not the dudes. And it is also covered in salamanders. Every 15 years, all of the tectonic plates on Nocturne go completely fucked, and the entire planet enters this kind of like volcanic hell state.
Oh,
and so their culture is built around surviving that, essentially.
okay.
And so there are a couple of cities that survive it reliably, but whole continents move. Like it's, you know, it's constantly in a state of flux. And that's sort of where their culture stems from. And I really like that idea, but I also like the idea that how disconnected from that you'd feel if you were a Primaris. Because the cool thing the book establishes is that a lot of the Primaris were taken when they were, you know, at the point they were about to be initiated as full Astartes, they were sort of seconded by Belisarius Cawl and kind of secreted away. So I came up with this idea of what if there was like a company worth of recruits that were seconded out of the Salamander's recruitment process after the Great Crusade, but not long after the Great Crusade. Like, so it's, you know, Millennium 31 or something. Horus is dead.
Yeah.
But, you know, and Guilliman has given Vulcan permission to kind of recruit because the Salamanders are so badly devastated by the Dropsite Massacre and things like that.
Yeah.
But he also convinces Vulcan to kind of like put aside some recruits and give them to Belisarius Cawl, which is a really big decision if you know, don't have very many Marines as it is. But some of them get seconded and become Primaris 10,000 years later, but they come back to a world that's they should be really attached to and they've been trained to be really attached to, but it's completely changed because
It's rearranged.
It rearranges itself every 15 years and they've been gone for 9,000 years. And I like the idea that like they are sort of almost given leave to essentially like find their purpose elsewhere. So it's like a fleet chapter of Salamander Primaris, exclusively Primaris, that feel disconnected from Nocturne. So they've just sort of wandered off into space, like to essentially, because their job is like one of their core beliefs is to protect the helpless, which is why they're relatively good as far as Space Marines, as far as Space Marines go. Yeah. And so the notion that they would perceive what's happening to the galaxy with the galaxy tearing itself apart with the Great Rift and stuff as an equivalent to what happens on their planet. And so their job is to go off into the galaxy and hold it together. And then they can come back and refine their connection to Nocturne, but they're kind of gone. And I really liked everything about that idea, right? Why they'd be Primaris and so on. Or why it would be exclusively Primaris. The fact that it would sort of fit outside of the company structure, so I could fiddle with the paint scheme a little bit. I wanted to add some more bronze to the Salamander's scheme, which is like green and black and fire, to kind of make them look a bit more like Heresy Salamanders, to kind of tie them to that. Okay. I had this whole idea in my head. Turns out I hate painting Salamanders green. And so this whole story I've just told you, right?
Yeah.
Hit this rollback as it did for me. I decided to take a break from the big feathery boy that I've been doing this month to paint a salamander. I just thought I'll do one Marine from the box like I did with the Death Guard.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a better way of doing it, but salamanders are like warpstone glow as their base green, and it's most of the layer paints are quite transparent anyway. It's super transparent. I got up to 7 coats.
Oh god.
7 thin coats before I'd really gotten anywhere near acceptable.
Yeah.
And this is over a dark green base. It's just super runny and washy and unpleasant. And I had to have that think about myself. You know, like, picture yourself 20 Marines in. You just did 20 shiny red Thousand Suns in the stupidest way possible. Like, is this, do you want this for yourself?
Yeah.
So that whole idea is on ice. I've got enough to do as it is that I'm probably not going to come back to Space Marines for a little while anyway.
Yeah.
But that might be me back to square one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Could you perhaps tweak the green a bit, go for a more orky green or something?
I don't know, because you go too dark, you become Dark Angels.
Oh, that's true.
Like, you gotta stay out of Dark Angel range. And literally out of the Dark Angel end of the paint range. And that's the thing. And also, because I kind of want them to look and feel like salamanders. I think I might try a different method. Because I do really like the idea, but I did also like the idea of doing Imperial Fists. And you know what's easier than green? Yellow. So I don't know. Like, I'm back to square. I don't know with them, but it's a good enough set of. I actually thought about writing some like a short story or something based on that idea because I really like the idea, but and it's stuck in my head for a good train journey or two. But yeah, it's that thing where your mind's eye fiction collides with. I think when you're planning an army, you have to like both sides. You have to have a fictional idea, a high concept that you enjoy, but fundamentally, you really do need to enjoy the process of painting them, or else it's not.
It becomes a job.
Going to be fun, right? Yeah. Like, you know, I think you did it the right way around with your Stormcast to some extent because you kind of went with what's on the box. You were getting back into the hobby.
Yeah.
But you've ended up steering it in a direction that's yours. But it also hasn't been a giant onerous chore.
No, it hasn't. Gold is nice. The gold paints are lovely. It's just a really nice part of their range. So yeah, I was lucky in that sense.
How's your Path to Glory campaign been going?
Oh yeah, it's going really good. So, pretty much played a game a week for the last month, pretty much. And Path to Glory is basically, picks up where Skirmish leaves off. So Skirmish is just, you get like a dozen dudes probably by the end of the campaign. And then Path to Glory, you got like, your general, maybe 3 units. And, each time you complete a battle, you can, spend glory points for new heroes or to upgrade your existing units, that kind of stuff. And you can randomize the stuff that you put into your force next. And obviously we limited it based on the actual models we had. But it still ended up with one of my first starting units being a troop of Gryph-hounds. Just 3 Gryph-hounds, just running around the place, eating people, darting, running away, that kind of stuff.
Being birds, being dogs.
Yeah. And I'd never take a unit of Gryph-hounds if I was doing match play. So it's another interesting thing about how points affect, the way you look at your own units. Because in a point sense, they're just not very good for what they do. They've got some cool tricks. They can run out of combat, which is really, really nice. And they can honk to alert, archers if someone's been summoned within sort of 10 inches or something like that. Some nice kind of edge case stuff. But it was really, really fun just to have them running around on the table fighting ghouls. And Jim had to put down, a unit of 10 crypt ghouls, because the scenarios also limit the amount of sort of things you could take in a unit. So
Right.
It says you've got to have 10. You'd normally run like 20 probably, at least. And I would normally like run, probably more Gryph-hounds than 3. It's an odd number for Gryph-hounds. And it's forced us to use those units and just kind of work around the limitations of our forces and in a really, really interesting way. And the scenarios have been fun. And the context of kind of growing your force and building a story over the course of the campaign is really, really satisfying. So it's been a really good way to play the game and to kind of force us to use the models we painted in different ways and to kind of rely on models we wouldn't normally rely on. And Chip's been running around with a massive Terrorgeist, which is it looks like a zombie dragon, but it's like a bat version who, you can scream at people and does bravery damage and stuff. It's just a really exciting thing to fight. So yeah, it's been really good. It's been really, really cool. Really a good way of structuring a narrative and also giving it, just enough structure to let you not worry about points and just kind of throw models down and play.
Perfect, right?
Yeah. Really, really nice. It's really, really good. And it makes me really excited about the idea of that kind of grand strategy campaign supplement, because they've done such a good job with this one.
It's nice because it sort of rewards building one big collection as well, rather than like, I mean, there's also benefits to going to the direction where you go like, I'm going to have a whole bunch of different 1,000 point armies. So I've got a little bit of everything and you can change a lot, but that's attractive. But I think with AOS particularly now, I'm looking forward to the day where I have so much Tzeentch of different types that we can kind of decide what kind of thing are we doing? What kind of campaign are we doing? And I can go more mortals, more demons, like have the demons on the side. Like ultimately I kind of want my demon stuff to be almost like a side deck kind of to pull from for summoning. Like to have a team of mortals that pulls on demons to help rather than demons are currently my entire army really. But
and I've got a bunch of Vanguard stuff and it wouldn't take much for me to build out a Vanguard kind of wing to my army. And I also want to buy another box of Liberators because I've never actually painted the box set of Liberators, all the extras that comes with it. And also it comes with Grand Hammers and a lot of the stuff that the starter libs don't come with. So yeah, there's loads of stuff I want to do. I want to paint some more Prosecutors even, especially now they've repointed the Javelins.
You should totally swap in the Shadespire Liberators as primes.
I certainly will, yeah. That's a really good way of doing it. Because they are supposed to be libs, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all Liberators. Because they have, one of them has like a hammer and shield, one of them has a Grand Hammer, so it's a swapping in. Because the Liberator Prime can take a...
Oh, that's great, because that gives me a little bit of offense that they lack at the moment, because I don't have them built most optimally.
Yeah.
I wish that they would sell Star Soul Maces in some capacity, like having to hack together axes to get up to 4. I still don't have 4, and in my unit of 10, I mean 3 is enough, frankly. But
you're close enough as like
you want that little bit extra mortal wound, but
yeah. Well, I don't. So my entire hobby month. Well, you know what my entire hobby month has been. It's been
very exciting.
Yeah. So after we finished recording last episode, obviously I'd been planning for a while with this event coming up the end of this week.
Yeah.
That August was going to be my all in on Tzeentch getting to 2,000 points. And I will get there. I've had to make some adjustments along the way. And I made a decision along the way that actually I want to go demons. One of the reasons for that was, I think like I didn't want to paint my Zangors to a time limit because those are detailed models. And I knew that there was another big model that I had to get done, which was my Lord of Change. Who I've been sort of sitting on for a while, not literally, but he's been there for a while. So I ended up, right after we recorded this episode, kind of starting the process of assembling him, which was weird. It felt like kind of, it's such a big project for me, and I've kind of had it in my head, and I've had that lot of change in my head, like what I wanted since before that kit was revealed, like the new Lord of Change. And it's been a really weird experience. A good one, but like I had not done a large model on that scale before, and I had not like used all of everything I've learned over the last couple of years, of the last year, I guess, on one project. I thought it was going to take me a week, Tom. Right. I thought it was going to take me a week.
Oh dear.
It took me 3.5 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
And admittedly, I did have some sort of, extenuating circumstances, some real life stuff that got in the way. But this was, I think, easily north of 60 hours on one model, which is a commitment. You say that it's much nicer thinking that after you've already done it than thinking that ahead of the project. Like, pro tip, always assume it's going to take a week.
Right.
Because then 3 weeks later, when you discover that you spent 60 hours painting something, you don't feel completely paralyzed by how long it's actually going to take.
Yeah.
It's also, I think that between this and how my thinking has changed recently, it's interesting. Like, what makes a model easy and hard to paint is actually quite a complicated thing. Like you're saying about the Primaris being edge highlighting forever. Edge highlighting accurately is hard. I still can't do it very well.
Yeah.
That means that the clean Space Marines that you think will be easy to paint are hard to paint, whereas the Gribbly Nurgle models that are covered in intense detail are actually pretty easy to paint because they take washes very, very well. They dry brush well as well. And so that is true to an extent, but I think I've realized, you'd think I would have realized this by now, I've kind of realized why Tzeentch specifically is so, not difficult, but like, it's so easy to just kind of, for it to feel super intimidating at times. And that's because Tzeentch is covered in detail, like Nurgle is, like a Nurgle model.
Yeah.
But unlike Nurgle, a lot of that detail isn't like organic. It's not, skulls and pustules and tentacles and buboes. Some of those things. It's also intricate jewelry, like millions of gemstones, filigreed shoulder pads with eyes, knees that have mouths, that have tongues, that have teeth, elbows that have eyes, that have hand claws, shoots that are emitting the nascent bubbling mutant form of a baby screamer at the point of its existence that's also on fire. Like, they kind of do everything. And there's definitely, I watched some tutorials to get ready for the model. I did some sub-assemblies and things. But there's a degree to which, literally, you can keep painting that model forever. Like, and because you have choices. You can dry brush feathers. That helps a lot. You don't have to pick out every gemstone. You can leave them gold. They could be gold bubbles or gold lumps on the thing. But I had this in for a penny, in for a pound thing where, like, early as last week, I thought, I'm not going to do all the gems. I did all the gemstones. Right. Yeah. I'm not like, I did the feathers on the wings in stages. There'll be there's pictures. It's helpful to have pictures because it's such a big model and I spent so long on it that it's got quite a lot going on. And that's what I wanted. Like, I wanted it to be obviously a showpiece model. It's going to be the leader of my army forever as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's right.
I wanted it to be a model that you could look at, and because I agree with the assessment I think you've made on the pod before, Tom, that miniatures painting is obviously a lot of the time creativity with the hard part taken away. The blank slate is taken away and replaced by a brilliant model that someone else has made. And whoever did the Lord of Change model did an amazing job. There is so much detail on it.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, there's loads of it, and there's a kind of intense, weird, magical logic to how it fits together, like what materials are and like how they transform into each other. And you can interpret that your own way in a bunch of different ways. And I wanted to bring out all those details, but two, I wanted a model that I could stare at and I wanted it to tell the story of what it is, essentially, and for it to tie into the rest of my army and then all the rest of that stuff. And I'm talking a lot about without explaining what it actually is, but that meant that, like, I wanted to use the green fire stuff that has been on the rest of my models, but imply that this is the guy that is coming from. And that involves like 4 or 5 different ideas from, the tip of his staff is made out of that green fire, but almost like it's burning up. And then the tip of that touches, the base, which was my biggest experiment with green stuff and Plasticard yet. So there's a burning, essentially he has burned a hole in reality. And so there's a space portal, which the Changeling was a practice run for, surrounded by green stuff fire that's sort of coming out of the bottom of his staff, but it forms the Tzeentch symbol, sort of ripping a hole in the ground underneath him. And that was a reference to his spell, and that's coming up into his staff. Also, the kind of green energy is coming out of his mouth, and it's coming out of his staff. And the closer you get to the edges of his wings, I wanted them to look like they were burning up, or that they're always burning at the edge. Like he himself is almost like a rip in space-time. Because they're not supposed to be real demons. They are like ideas made flesh kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also, when they do manifest, I want it to be like, he's all in on manifesting. He's manifesting the fuck out of this. It is this kind of like, it should be spectacular as well. It's not subtle, right?
Yeah,
like if you are a greater demon of Tzeentch, you are, and I wanted like sort of neon-y gradients, like an 80s palette, like purples and teal and stuff, and loads of different ideas. And hopefully they stick. I think the reason they stick is because I use all of them elsewhere in my army, and they all come together in him.
Yeah.
But it also meant loads of different techniques. And then like I was doing he has long feathers, like the Lord of Change wings end in long feathers, and I knew I wanted them to fade them out to green, like bright green. But I realized then that I needed something to be burning away. Like it couldn't just be a feather that gets hot at the end.
Yeah.
So I ended up just painting a starscape on the insides and the outsides of his wings, which took 2 days. And I really like how it looks. And again, it's one of those things where if you look at it in that way, then you can see that. And that's exactly what I wanted. But it was so labor intensive that like I found myself like midway through that thing just going like, I want to paint a Necron.
I just want to dry brush
I
a
want
robot.
a skeleton. I just want to dry brush a skeleton. And I did use a lot of dry brushing, like a lot of initial dry brushing for the highlights and things. And I think it really made me, it's been such a gratifying thing. And I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm obsessing over it, but I've been doing one thing for 3.5 weeks.
It's an incredible model. It's turned out so well.
Thanks, man. Like I'm sort of tentatively pleased with it because also I did that thing of, how, like, when you finish base coating a model, it kind of instantly levels up. Like as soon as you've got any spray primer still visible, it looks bad.
Yeah.
And then you get the color on, even if it's not properly shaded yet, and it's sort of like, bing, it's sort of almost ready. And then you go through those evolutions. This really paid off late in that kind of way.
Right. I know what you mean.
Because also you tunnel vision on one technique, because there's a lot of different things. Like, I did one thing for a long time. A lot of gold, a lot of lapis lazuli that I've been trying to do. A lot of, feathers, and then realizing that and then going back and looking at the heavy metal one on the box and thinking, how have they done this? Like I did one first pass on the eyes, which are a tiny detail on a big model, and realized that the difference between mine and the heavy metal ones is they paint the eyelids. And I was like, okay, get the thinner brush. We're going back in. And so I spent like half an hour redoing his eyelids. But it pays off in the end. But it's like, it's that sort of mad process. You tunnel vision on it so hard. And it wasn't until I kind of pinned it together today, because it's pinned into the base as well, because it's so big.
Yeah.
That I sort of like put it down and then stepped back, and I was like, I did it. Yeah. And which is a great feeling. It makes the whole thing worth it. It really does. I think so. The two things I would say about that process and the experience of it. One is that it made me realize, it's like, I think painting is not one skill. It's like a million different skills. You can break it down any number of different ways, from individual techniques to things like, if it was a stat line on a character, then your stats would be things like technical expertise, imagination, patience. Like there's a lot of things that are sort of things. And I think I'm quite patient and I can have a decent idea for a model, but it really exposed my technical ability. Like I'm okay, but I can look at what a really good painter can do. And I know, and I felt this way a lot since I started painting again, but there's a knowledge that I could execute this idea much better if I spent a couple of years improving fundamentals, right? And I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to come back to this idea because, hopefully I'll be into miniatures gaming for a long time, but I don't want to redo my entire Tzeentch army, but good in 15 years when I've actually can do this stuff. Cause you look at what, like the studio painters and stuff at Games Workshop, or like anyone on Cool Mini or not, or anywhere where, cause I look at this stuff and I realize how far away I am from this. Cause I cut corners and I can paint for a table level, but you go up close and it's just not as good as what other people can do. And I kind of accept that. I think it's compensated for by the amount of time I pour into it. And this whole project just felt like a bucket of time. It just felt like a bucket I was filling with time. And then a Birdman came out.
Was it worth it?
Yeah,
Good.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Cause like I'm really pleased with that model. And, you know, it was great to put him on the table today and play with him, which we'll obviously talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But like, you know, that's why you do it. Like, and I mean, the flip side to that is I know it's to the best of my ability, but when you invest that much time, there's that thing of like, it makes you aware of everything you can and can't do. And so, you know, I'm pleased with myself for combining lots of different techniques, for using green stuff effectively for the first time, for building a scenic base that I'm proud of. But there's also the flip side of me that is like, if I knew what I was doing with, object source lighting, I could have done a lot more. Like, you know, and all this kind of, you know, you always have, yeah, this will sound pat and shit and cliched, but it made me realize how far I've come. Well, also how far I've yet to go. And I don't know how far I want to go with it really, but it was like, you know, I'm talking about this like it was some kind of traumatic life experience that I've been through. But I spent a long time in a conservatory with a birdman, and like, because so I'll get 2 top tips out of this for the month. One is that, so sub-assemblies were a necessity for the staff, particularly because it gets in the way of a lot of the model, and I want to be able to angle it relative to the base in the end. And the things hanging from his hips because they get in the way as well. And you're painting a big model, you want the maximum level of detail you can. It's not a small model where someone can't see behind the stuff you glue on them. Yeah. People will be peering at it up close. You can't get away with masking, like hiding unpainted bits and stuff, really. You probably could if you weren't. I worry about it, so I didn't. But like, so there's some sub-assemblies, but also because of what I'm doing with the base, with the space portal, I couldn't paint him on the base. There's no way I could do that Nebula. Yeah. And also you want to get up in that loincloth with a paintbrush.
Yeah, up in the thighs, I suppose.
Yeah, like I painted the loincloth separately as well. They all came on separately. So if you look up between his legs, he's got his thigh veins. I picked them out. I picked that shit out. You can't see them, but they're there. And so that meant I painted him off his base, but he's fucking massive. So my old thing of, you know, blue tack it to a jam jar, that's not going to work. So my solution was I drilled holes in his feet and put pins in them, and then drilled holes in a plastic takeout box matching his feet, and then stuck him in that so that he would support his own weight standing up on this takeout box, which he lived on for a month. And then when I painted him, I had to pick him up and hold him and kind of like balance him on my chest while lying down in a chair like a baby. And because that meant I put pointy brass rods in his feet, and he's a pointy boy. He's got pointy hands, he's got pointy wings, he's got a pointy little tail, he's got a pointy face. One of his knees is a mouth. It means I've stabbed myself with every single part of that model.
You wounded yourself.
Like, I didn't bleed on him, but I might have done. I don't know. Maybe I did.
Blood and sweat.
Yeah, it is literally one of those things. It's like, you invest, you know, I'm going to bash out a lot of pink horrors this week, and they're getting bashed out. Yeah. Like, fuck them.
They deserve it.
Yeah, but, you know, sometimes you don't, and sometimes you go for it, and you end up sort of like dramatically connected to this thing you've made. Yeah. He's my son, is what I'm saying.
Tiny bird son.
My magic son.
Excellent.
The other thing, so someone on Discord, because I posted a work in progress of the wings when they were on their way, after I'd done the Starscape. I'm normally super coy about work in progress stuff because I never want to work in progress something that I don't finish. Because that thing it's a bit like telling someone about your novel, right? Yeah. Like, I don't have a novel, but you know what I mean? That thing of like, you get the satisfaction of having shown somebody, so you don't then do it. Yeah. But I did actually do work in progresses with this, because if you do something for 3 weeks, you go a bit bananas with it. But someone asked about specifically the Starscape effect, and I think that's a thing I could just tell people how to do. Yeah, I think I might have nicked this from you, so stop me if I nick this from you. I think I might have nicked it from looking at one of your models and figuring out how or how you might have done it. So
yeah, I don't know if you use Starscapes, but not like nebulae like you've done.
Yeah, well, it's the same sort of idea. Yeah. So this also, it's time consuming, but this is how I got what I want. This is also the same for the changeling base. So and interestingly, I find that a lot of interesting things like painting materials, like doing the green fire is the opposite of space. There you go. One is from a white base coat and one is from black. Yeah. But they're quite similar techniques, with the exception of the stars themselves. So, but you could flip a lot of the techniques and they would work either way. So you start off with black, so the wings start black, and then you paint the stars in with little dots of Fenris grey, which is very pale blue, basically. You don't want white at that point, or ever really, but and that, also, you could probably try and get away with like spraying them from like flicking along a paintbrush or something to try and like spray points on, but it's not going to look right. Yeah. Because true random distribution doesn't look right. You have to you have to do fake random distribution, which is just like a Zen mind state you end up in, where you don't put too many close together, but you also don't form patterns.
Yeah.
Also, it allows you to paint constellations and things in, like manually, like in and among the chaos.
Yes.
And you can make some bigger than others or whatever, or do some as a little cross rather than a thing, but you don't have to at that point. You just get the speckled starscape in. And then you make a glaze out of Lahmian medium. And so my nebulae are blue and purple they were green and purple for the changeling. But I did blue and purple because they were going to fade to green. And then you take the darkest color of each of those. So that was Cantor blue for me and, Nagaroth night for the purple.
Oh, yeah.
And the first thing you do is make a blue glaze, and pretty thin. Like, so much so that over black, you almost won't see it. So that you go over it. But you can put quite a lot on your brush, so it's quite goopy. And what's interesting about this is it means it pools and streaks.
Yeah, that's right.
And that actually looks like an aurora borealis or a nebula, weirdly, because of the way it clouds. And it would look bad in any other context, but that's what you're going for.
Yeah.
And what that does, and you use your judgment, you kind of create that pattern in a kind of organic way, making it look like nebula and stuff. And you do that with both colors, and they can blend in with each other a little bit, because then you create the kind of moments of things. And you should also leave gaps, so there's pure black space between them. And they'll also go over and stain those Fenris grey spots, blue or purple. Then you get the Fenris grey again, and you go back over and pick out like maybe a third of the stars that you did previously, back over the same stars, and maybe add some new ones. But what that means is you have then a layer of stars that have been stained, and a layer of stars that haven't, and that creates depth of field. And then you create a slightly less Lahmian medium heavy glaze of the same color, and build it up again, and sort of push your kind of blobby nebulae bits of a glaze out to the edges and things. And you'll start to naturally, and then you go over again, you build up another layer of stars, and you build out the stars again. And then you go up to a lighter shade and do the glazes again. You kind of just build them up in that way and kind of mix them in together. And then you do a final pass with white and just pick up a few of the stars, which are then the ones that are in the foreground. So this is absolute pedantry, but there are 9 stars in the foreground across both wings. Right. Because I just wanted to get 9 in there somewhere.
Nice.
And also that's the kind of thing you think of when it's like Thursday afternoon, you've been doing this for your entire life. But that is, it's actually not hard. It's a little bit time consuming, but you, once you get through it, you've kind of given yourself a depth of field effect without having to worry about, like painting different shades of stars to kind of try and suggest some foreground and some background. Like you get the foreground and background for free, essentially, by just going back over yourself. But also it does create a sense of depth on a flat plane, which is the key with what I want. Because this stuff is not supposed to be like a star pattern that has been painted on someone's clothes. Yeah. It's supposed to be actual space that you're seeing through his wings, because he's a demon, a thought creature, or like in the case of the nebula on his base, which I did at the same time, it literally is like a hole in space. So that is painted onto a piece of plastic card so that it is perfectly flat, so that it, it looks like, it's different to the ground around it. That's a hole, not a pattern. That's how you paint space on the many feathers of the magical mystical bird creature.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good technique, that one, with building up. You can create gradients doing it as well. Like I used a similar thing to highlight the pauldrons on my hunters, where nice. It's kind of difficult to do that sort of manually by mixing colors without having gaps between them, but you can glaze up and push the glaze into the point where you want the color to be at its most intense, and gradually build up a gradient that way. So that's a good one. It's kind of nerve wracking because it's like really thin down paint. As you pointed out, it just doesn't look different when you start doing it. You have to trust that by the 10th one it will come together. Yeah. And then it's also kind of controlling the paint while it's still wet on the thing, which it can be nerve wracking if you've got a lot on there. But yeah, it's a good one.
I had that because in my painting setup in the conservatory, when the sun comes up, or when like it reaches its kind of morning height about 9 a.m., it's like right in my eyes and I can't see. So I have to kind of turn away. But this morning I knew I was like on the final sprint to finish the model. Sometimes I'll just take a break at that point and go do some work or something. But like, I wanted him done, and I still had the fucking horns on his wings to paint, obviously, because he's got horns on his wings, and that's highlighting black in a particular way to make it look like bone. And I couldn't see the highlight going on. I couldn't see the difference in Eshin grey and black.
Yeah, that's
so I was just like blind, kind of staring into the thing. Like, I trust that this is happening. So I finished in this sort of like mad reverie, like stabbing myself in the chest with it. Like, yeah. But got there in the end, and definitely not scarred by that process. And looking forward to more hobby.
This is what I fear about the Stardrake as well, where like, will it be a 3-week project? I was lucky because I got the Prime done in a weekend, and that was, I felt relief because I thought that it turns out there's not too much. Once you've done the star orrery thing that he's standing on, the rest is pretty straightforward.
He's a big Stormcast.
He's a big Stormcast. He's exactly the same as every other Stormcast you've done. So it's all those techniques are really fast. And it's just the base that takes up all the time. And that was like super fast and super fun and immediately gives your army a centerpiece, which is, a lovely thing when it's on your shelf. But the Stardrake may not be that.
This kind of made me want to do more big creatures.
Yeah.
Because it is fun.
It is fun.
But, so like, that whole kit is basically like a Tzeentchian trap because you can keep going. Right? Like, and you can sort of trick yourself into just taking on stupid new challenges. Like, there's no need to paint the Starscape onto his wings. Like, they're feathers. You could paint them as feathers, which are super easy to paint. They dry brush really well. If you want, that's fine. And if he wasn't a magical space bird man thing, I might have just done that, right? Like, if I was painting some ether wings or a Palador or something, like, I don't want, like, you probably shouldn't paint a Starscape on them because that doesn't make any sense. Actually, maybe not them because they do actually teleport.
They can sort of go into,
they go into hyperspace.
Yes.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if I was painting a dragon, right? Like a normal terrestrial dragon.
Yes.
I don't think I would go insane edge highlight, painting an individual flame on every scale of its back or something. It was because this model kind of invites that kind of engagement.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, actually, dry brushing a big model, like, base coating his skin and getting the basic highlights in, that was super easy. That was just like, wow, this is going to take me a matter of days. It's just when you fall down the detail hole, and I feel like the Tzeentch stuff Tzeentch feels like it has a deeper detail hole than a lot of models from any range, really.
Yeah, sure.
If you're painting like an orc on the Maw-Crusher, which is an amazing model, but Maw-Crusher doesn't need you to go nuts on the details with that. It's
Dry
a
brushes
cool
extremely
looking
well, yeah.
mega battle turtle thing.
Yeah.
Like, it'll dry brush really well. You'll get it through it. Like, Zombie Dragon or something will be similar. Like, I don't think it should necessarily be this intimidating. Imperial Knight, even.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dry brushing metal and then painting the panels nicely and you're done.
Yeah.
I think this is specifically short of, like, I think Archaon's probably another one of those kits where you can probably easily fall down a big detail hole with it. But
yeah,
this hasn't put me off big kits, but it's like, I'm not doing another lot of change.
No, that's nuts. Yeah. The Stardrake, I mean, he's a Stardrake, and you can put loads of space
Yeah, he
on
could
his
be made of
wings and
starlight.
stuff, yeah.
Trust me.
So maybe I'll go nuts, so I'll just go feral, and by Christmas I'll have a Stardrake, and it'll be orange or something.
Yeah. Do you have two of them, or am I making that up?
I've got one of them.
Oh, you got one of them. Okay, fine. I was just worried that you would end up in a situation like, now, time to start on the second one.
Yeah, Jesus. They are a bit cheaper. Now they've been repointed a little bit.
It's not a reason.
I do love dragon models. I'm not, like, I think there's, I've got some problems with the Stardrake model, actually. I'm not a fan of its posture and, a lot of stuff, a lot of the detail I like, and it's the power and it's got an amazing face. But we'll see. Maybe once I've got one, it'll be my own little lizardy baby and I'll love it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I had some concerns about the dynamism of the Lord of Change pose, but
Yeah.
I just, my boy now,
fine,
my
great,
weird
yeah.
boy. Good.
Excellent.
Shall we talk about the game we played with the big
do that.
old birdman?
Just a few hours ago, it was the first time I fought the Lord of Change, obviously.
Yeah.
After you'd spent 3 weeks painting it. Also finally gave me the opportunity to use my Celestant Prime.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. So I've been
that.
holding off and bringing him down and using him in any games until the Lord of Change came out. So to mark a moment of escalation in our ongoing campaign.
And also a moment of me finally delivering on my half of a kind of mad hero miniature bargain. So this game, obviously a game of Age of Sigmar between my Tzeentch demons and friends and your Stormcast, I think we kind of intended as a narrative follow on from the games we played last time.
Yeah.
So to recap briefly, Stormcast established a beachhead, sort of, in a part of the realm of metal where Tzeentch's ascendant seeking an entryway to the Silver Tower. We haven't really decided whether this is like a prequel to our Silver Tower campaign or a sequel to it. We'll figure that out at some point. However, their guide on the way was a Duarden Fire Slayer who turned out to be the Changeling, zapped some dudes.
Yep.
But they did win the battle on the beach. well, I say beach. I do think of it as kind of like an iron shoreline kind of thing, up into a ruined settlement, where they were actually beaten back for the first time ever.
This tide started to turn.
Basically because of bollocks, but it's Tzeentch, so that's fine.
The heroism of an extremely roidy Thaumaturge Minotaur.
Just ripping Fulminators to pieces.
Yeah, going down a flank.
But it was it was a marginal victory. Like, you failed. It wasn't that your Stormcast had been, annihilated or anything. It was that they failed to consolidate their initial advantage and were sort of pushed back.
Yeah.
So apparently, Sigmar's response was to muster, sort of some of the big guns. Not a huge force initially, but your army was basically like a lot of the stuff we used to run before we started experimenting with having bring in the Vanguard Hunters and things.
Yes.
So do you want to run through what you had on your side?
It would be up in the realm Zurich or whatever, in space. There was the 10 Retributors with the few Starsar Maces.
I love them. They're my favourite.
They're amazing. On the ground, there are 2 Fulminators with my Lord Ursa on Dracoth. Then I had my Relictor, who's just a superhero of both my campaign with you and with Chimp, actually. He's just like a really characterful model. And he had Lightning Chariot, which is a spell that lets you kind of teleport people across the battlefield on a chariot made of lightning, which is sweet. Had 5 Judicators who were bowmen, 5 Liberators who were just normal hammer and shield guys, and what's it called? Night Venator, which is like a gold man with enormous wings and a bow and a bird who flies out and pecks people's eyes out. Once a game, he gets to shoot like a super mega arrow that can take out heroes in one hit, if you roll correctly. And who else I have? I had some hunters who are in pursuit. That means they can kind of come on like skirmishers after the game has started. And that was it, I think. Oh, and the Celestant Prime.
Oh, yeah.
That.
You should explain how he works, because it'll be relevant.
Yeah, so he always sets up in space, pretty much. You can choose when he comes down, whereas if you use the space rule, normally you're looking for a roll of 3+ in each turn to actually bring someone down. And you have to roll each turn, so it's slightly out of your control. But the Prime can stay up there as long as you like, and for every battle round he stays up there, he charges up his hammer, which is Galmaraz, i.e. like the Warhammer, that the whole thing is named after.
It is.
He's got it. It's the
Sigmar's
Warhammer.
actual hammer.
And so every time he charges it up each round, he gets an extra 2 attacks when he eventually comes down. And it's a really amazing weapon. It's like Ren 3, which means most things don't get an armor save, damage 3, and it can get up to 10 attacks off something if you keep him up there until the very last minute. So you can potentially do a lot of killing, but he's a little bit of a glass cannon. He's not, he's got like 8 wounds behind a 3 or 4+ save, something like that. So he's not like, easily killable. But it's that choice of when you bring him down. He's also got a scepter that drops comets on people's heads.
Yes, there's that too.
So there's 2 ways to use him really. Either you put him down and kind of use him as an artillery unit from the very beginning and just use him to kind of block stuff off because he's got a big base, or you bring him down fairly late, but like 2/3 of the way through the battle and kill something important with him.
Yeah, it's worth stressing that the Changeling, the Celestant Prime he's not a Celestant Prime, he is the Celestant Prime.
Yes, that's true.
So he is a unique character. They never revealed who he is underneath the armor. Everyone thinks it's Karl Franz.
Yeah.
It could also be Felix from Felix and Gotrek is one of the other theories.
Either way, he's an automaton now. There's nothing left of his personality. He's just a kind of zombie, really.
And he's sort of deployed in the moments of direst need, in theory. To sort of, where Sigmar kind of is most directly applying his will. So it's kind of appropriate that when there's a Lord of Change on the table, then
he would send down the big hitter to help out his forces. Yeah, sure.
So, my army would be relatively familiar. It was, Lord of Change, Chariot, Utunians, Pink Horrors, Unit Screamers, Flamers, the Ogre Thaumaturge, the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, the Gaunt Summoner, again, he's back, with his familiars, and the Changeling. The newly FAQ'd Changeling. We went flicking through the old General's Handbook, actually, because we didn't have the new one with us, for a scenario, and ended up playing, I think it's called, War of Storms.
Yeah, something like that.
So this was to sort of, we're trying to find something that would suit this kind of, like this kind of battle of wills between 2 gods, basically, like Tzeentch and Sigmar, both kind of manifesting big aspects of themselves on the battlefield. So the way this works is, there is a storm front in the middle of the board, initially, kind of across the middle of the board. And every turn, at the beginning of every full round, you roll off, and whoever wins that roll sort of pushes it towards their opponent. If you wound the enemy general, you get to push it again. And if you kill the enemy general, you get to push it really far. And if at any point it touches, your opponent's side, so you get your Stormfront all the way across, you win. So, and then you get sort of bonus abilities that you can use while you're in your half, although that didn't really come up much.
No.
It was just a way of kind of, it was basically just a big scrap, to be honest, but with this kind of mechanic that did affect some things. Did affect some decisions. And it's sort of thematically interesting as well, because like, in one half we have sort of roiling Tzeentchian magic, like this civilization that's just sort of gone completely to chaos, almost that it's close to the realm of chaos at this point. Like it's sort of being pulled halfway in. And then the other half you have like Sigmar's Stormfront, literally. with the lightning coming down and the Stormcast coming down.
And it's cool because, if you've got a priest, you get a bonus to the rolls, when you're trying to push the storm. So my Relictor was actually just kind of trying to command the storm and fighting the will of Tzeentch as he was, charging into battle and stuff.
And there's a few other things that sort of fit thematically nicely with that. So this is not going to be a full blow by blow, I think. I think we might sort of, there'll be pictures and a little write up on the website, but it'd be more interesting, I think, to go through like kind of how things shook out and kind of, but also kind of what the big moments of the battle were. Cause it wasn't one of those games where like there was like one key turn. It was like there were moments and but mostly it was about sort of prevailing momentum.
Yeah.
I think, and some interesting moments.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So you finished deploying first, which actually you don't normally, like I normally finish first, which is interesting, but that meant that you gave me initiative on the first turn. And, so I deployed sort of I knew what I wanted to do, which was, I deployed my Lord Change on one corner of the board, with some pink horrors in a position to kind of, move up and down. I deployed them I actually did some moving correctly for once in my life, but basically I wanted to create a really awkward band of units either side of the Lord of Change, because like, I know that my habit of charging across the board at you is one of the things that has been losing me games.
Yeah.
Because you're shooting as longer range than mine. We came against that last month.
Yeah.
So my initial aim was to force you to come to me so I get maximum shooting. Like, it's tempting to throw Lord Change into combat because he's a big boy.
Yeah.
But it's not where his strengths lies. His strengths are in his spells and his shooting. So, especially the way I've equipped him. So it's like, I will fight Inesh eventually if I need to, but I'm going to keep you at range for as long as I possibly can. So the first turn of movement, none of my spells really came off, and I made the decision to keep the Changeling hidden in your army and just slow down your Fulminators.
Yeah.
Which didn't make a difference for interesting reasons that we'll get to. But, I didn't reveal the Changeling straight away. Probably should have done, I think, but I didn't. We used the Liberator to represent the Changeling, which is a nice fun thing. Just a random Liberator Prime sat at this corner. Who's that guy? Don't know. Basically moved my, pink horrors forward, kept the screamers back, with Clear Sorcerer Lord sort of standing behind the Lord of Change ready to buff him. So across the corner of the board, I made like a really, really fucking awkward 9-inch. So basically, because Stormcast have so many things that can come in 9 inches away or whatever, 7 inches away in the case of the Vanguard Hunters, that's one technical lesson I've definitely learned since we started playing, is like how to create a bubble. Because I didn't want you to get the Retributor drop and pummel the Lord of Change to death and mortal wounds. Even if you got 14 wounds, but you'll still get them, like, eventually.
Yeah, sure.
And then that'd be the game. So I created that bubble. The other parts of my plan was I put sort of like stuff you can't ignore but probably want to ignore on my other flank. So the Chariot and the Thaumaturge and the Flamers.
Yeah. Because
they'll do a bit of damage, but I don't really think I'm going to keep any of them alive very long. But if you're spending time there, you're not spending time somewhere else, which could ultimately go in my favor. And then in the middle, I had the Gaunt Summoner almost bang in the middle with another unit of Pink Horrors ready to shield him. My aim with him was to get the Vortex up as soon as possible and stand on top of it with a 36-inch bubble, firing mortal wounds at things. So that was my opening turn was very passive. But I knew I didn't want to fall into the trap of running at you when you had the chance to get a double turn.
Indeed.
What was your thoughts at the beginning?
So I had my Fulminators and my General on the left, and they're kind of like opposite your Lord of Change pretty much. And I had like a central unit of classic shield wall of Liberators protecting the archers, which is just like a good thing to do with them. And the Venator there in the middle so that they could move and shoot anything they wanted on the board pretty much. The Relictor was within 3 inches of several key units, so that I could pick and choose which thing I lightning charioted depending on how you deployed. And it's a 3-inch range on that. So part of like clumping up so closely was I could teleport the general if I needed to, or Honky Man. Oh yeah, I forgot, like, that Honky Man was there. He's always there.
He's always there.
Or I could teleport the Fulminators or the Liberators or the Judicators. Like, they were all in the range of him. Like, so that's pretty much the logic there. So when it came around to my turn, basically refused flanked and, decided that I was going to put a lot of my strength onto the right-hand side of the board. A, to keep the general out of range of Tzeentch magic coming from the cluster of, like, wizards you had.
There was a cluster of wizards, that's the word of that.
Yeah. Around your Lord of Change there. So I thought, well, they could go and kill stuff and basically be relatively free of harm because they're quite tough. So, I used the register lightning chariots, the Fulminators. Even though they were moving at half speed, the lightning chariot doesn't move at half speed, so they zap them into a forest on the other side of the board.
Like, the implication there that the changeling finds some way of distracting them, to slow them down, and they're just like, nope. Don't care. Like,
you guys are going over there now. So he waggles his staff, and a lightning chariot carries them across the board. The general follows them, and he gets a good run roll that puts them in the forest as well. When they're in the forest, they're going to have +1 saves. They'll be like 2+. So they felt relatively safe if the flamers got within range of them. And, yeah, so what happened next? I think I just shot your flamers off.
you killed all the flamers with shooting from the Judicators and the Venator. Eagle killed the final one.
Yes. So yeah, got the flamers off because they're potentially very good.
Yeah. Well, actually, so you got them low, and then the honk.
Oh yeah.
Killed the final one and did 3 wounds to the chariot. So got the chariot to half as well.
Yeah. So much to do like a bunch of damage to probably some of the most offensive stuff in your army, pretty early. And also I was playing ideally for the double turn as well. So the Fulminators and the general were, if I got the double turn, they could come out of the forest and get a charge on the chariot. And they would be relatively safe if they didn't get the double turn, if you know what I mean. So it's that interesting thing in Age of Sigmar of like, well, this could go either way. And I don't want to like overly gamble with them because they're tough and they'll stick around for most of the game if I keep them alive. But I can keep them safe, and then run out in the second turn to do stuff.
The other big thing that happened is your Retributors came down straight away.
They did.
In their first turn.
They did. And that was like not ideal because I was hoping that I would open up space to then bring down the Retributors. Like, I didn't really want to bring them down that early. I wanted your army to be in a different shape. But yeah, I measured everything, behind the Lord of Change, like looking for that drop in the back, but you've done a really good job of just like shutting that down, which is exactly how you play against Stormcast. So they, like, it's been ages like going around with the measuring tape, figuring out where they could come down, because they've got to come down somewhere. And part of me thought, I thought about putting him down next to the Relictor so he could lightning chariot them in a future turn, basically kind of putting off the decision. But in the end, I thought, fuck it, and put them down right in the middle of the board, 9 inches away from your Gaunt Summoner, right in the middle of your army there. I thought, well, let's see how many things they can chew through before they die. Because I still got the Fulminators, I still got the Prime, that it's not like an all or nothing.
It actually looked rad as well. Because you had like a smaller army initially, and then this sort of like steel wall of like Retributors coming down.
They're coming
very
down
cinematic kind of image.
Yeah, through the storm as well. There's already like lightning striking everywhere. The Relictor is lightning charioting people across and also trying to, wrangle the storm his own way. And then these Retributors come down and they're sort of crackling with all this energy.
They did then fail their charge.
They failed their charge, obviously,
But it was a 9-inch charge, so it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty expected, really. Like, you put them down hoping for it, but, just them being there is like 30 wounds behind 4
it was at this point that I realized that there was a 50% chance based on the following turn roll of something really bad happening. And the reason for this is, so on the previous turn, there's 2 reasons why I didn't summon. This is to rewind time slightly, just back to a decision that turned out to have been pretty key, I think. I chose not to summon the Bellwind Vortex on the first turn, which I could have done because it boosts the Gaunt Summoner's range to 36. I'd put him 12 inches into the board. So if he...
There's that bubble of control there as well.
If he goes up on the Vortex straight away, he will cover the entire board, basically.
Yeah.
And also you can't enter within 3 inches of the Vortex. So that would create his control bubble. There are 2 reasons why I didn't summon it on the first turn. The first is, honest to God, I realized that I'd put the Gaunt Summoner down next to a piece of terrain.
Right.
And I didn't want to fuck with the board too much because it would mean moving my other models around. And that's just one of those things. I don't know how you'd handle that in a competitive circumstance because you push all units away from it 3 inches, which would have affected the Pink Horrors that he was standing next to. But I don't know what you do if there's a piece of terrain there. So I just thought, I'll move it forward. The other thought was that I wanted to create this really awkward, functionally like 6-inch sphere in the middle of the board that you'd have to like flow around like water around a rock. And he was a little bit too far back for that to be really useful to me. It would limit my movement options.
I think, regarding that rule, I think it just goes up and terrain isn't affected. Like, it's not going to move terrain around. I think it specifically says units, doesn't it? Or the models.
It does, but I mean, physically fitting the two things on is going to be a tricky thing, right? It also like, just felt like it was one of those sort of weird gamey moments, and I wanted the cinematic thing of him summoning it on open ground.
Yeah, sure.
So I had moved the Gaunt Summoner forward like 4 inches, so he was in the clear. Which would have been, so there's a couple of circumstances where he wasn't in any, he had Mystic Shield on him and reroll saves. So there was a sort of, I was hoping he wasn't going to get shot off if you did shoot at him. Also, the bulk of your army was, like quite slow. So obviously the Retributors can come down, but I was basically preoccupied shielding the Lord of Change. And I realized thinking about this that like what I could have done is moved the Screamers forward to shield the Gaunt Summoner from the front. Yeah. But that would have exposed the Lord of Change from the side. Yeah. So in hindsight, I don't think I would have done anything differently. But this is key because suddenly the Gaunt Summoner can be hypothetically pummeled to death before he can get up on the Vortex. But it comes down to who gets that turn roll off.
And I won it. Hooray! Stormcast got the double 10. And, so the Fulminators went up the right-hand side with the General. They failed to charge. They rolled a Snake Eyes for them. Cause they were 3 inches away. You have to be 3 inches away before you, attempt to charge. And sometimes that happens in AOS. Like, there's always that chance.
Yeah, you managed to roll a Snake Eyes on a 3-inch charge.
Yeah,
very funny.
Just happens. General went in, did his job, blew it up with mortal wounds from his hammer. That was good. Who did I shoot that turn? I think I shot the Thaumaturge bit.
You shot the Thaumaturge down to you took a couple of wounds off him, I think?
Yeah, I took a couple of wounds off him. I think I started shooting your Lord of Change.
You did. You also took 5 wounds off the Lord of Change for shooting.
Oh, that's what I did. Yeah. That was sensible of me. The Lord of Change is great. He's kind of like, seems very vulnerable to shooting because his save isn't amazing. And like, he doesn't seem to, like, if you had some sort of like -1 to hit on shooting abilities or something.
I'd given him reroll. Oh no, I hadn't. That's the thing. So on my first turn, this is one of the reasons this is brutal. So the Chaos Sorcerer Lord has that buff I had given him reroll saves of 1. I'd given him reroll saves of 1, but I forgot it that turn. That's just one thing that, was just one I was like, oh shit. Helped. But even then, like, the thing that had failed with Mystic Shield had failed on my hero phase, and then you got 2 full turns before I had a chance to,
that's unfortunate.
Back up.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So he was unusually exposed in that, and that was a really good head start and wounds on him. And because I damaged him, the Stormhead sort of pushed back a little bit.
The Retributors also made their
They made the charge. So they charged into the Gaunt Summoner, and...
Did you also bring down the Vanguard on that turn as well?
Oh, I did, yeah. Brought down the Vanguard on the very left-hand flank and kind of pushed them into some pink horrors, knowing that, like, if they were in combat, they'd be within shooting range of the Lord of Change. And also there was a chance they could beat the pink horrors, probably about, not
about 50, I think 5 Vanguard versus 10 pink horrors is like a wash. They just fight each other forever.
Pretty much. That's how it kind of turns out. And they struggle to, like, they certainly don't have the damage output to necessarily take out pink horrors as an entire unit, unless you get very lucky with rolls. But that was fine as expected. And that was it. That was my second turn.
Well, hang on. We're missing the Gaunt Summoner.
Oh, yeah. So he charged the Gaunt Summoner and blew him up.
Not before he, so you chose to activate your general first.
Yes.
Into the chariot, killed the chariot, and used your potion, which allows you to activate 2 things. And I think you activated the
hunters.
The hunters as well, because the one thing you weren't worried about was just the Gaunt Summoner by himself, like stabbing.
Yeah.
But this has never happened before, so the Gaunt Summoner has a really, on paper, totally terrible melee attack, where it's like hits on a 3, wounds on a 4, no rend, and it's only like 1 damage. But if it does wound, then before you apply that damage, you roll 2 dice, and if you can beat your opponent's bravery, you just remove a model, regardless of how many wounds it has. So hypothetically, it's the hero killer. But the idea is that he stabs you with like a Vorpal blade, and if you don't pass like a psychological test, you just turn into feathers and eyes and vanish. Yeah. And so, fuck one Retributor in particular. It actually happened for once. So you've got someone like managed to just pop a Retributor before anything can happen.
Yeah.
And I was I'd forgotten. It's been a while, and I'm an idiot. I'd completely forgotten how Star Soul maces work. I assumed they were the ones that explode on 6s, not that they're just automatic mortal wounds.
Oh yeah, they're bullshit.
Yeah,
they're total bullshit.
And so one of the Gaunt Summoner's familiars applies -1 to hit to you. So I was like, oh, your maces can't explode, which is true. The normal hammers can't explode because if you roll a 6, it becomes a 5, and therefore the effect doesn't trigger. but then you just rolled your Starsoul Mace roll, and it was just like
Just deleted him.
it was just like 8 mortal wounds. He is gone. So Gaunt Summoner gone completely. Like hasn't done anything. So yeah, and then it was my second turn, which this was like feeling like one of those games at that point because, well, there's a couple of things all at once. One was that, you, by wounding the general, you had managed to push, I think you'd pushed the Stormfront at that point to 6 inches from my side of the board.
Oh yeah, that's really
which is, means that and it moves in 6-inch increments. So if it moves again in your favor, I have lost the game. And you roll off before you roll for initiative each turn. So I have to push it back or I have a 50% chance of losing the game.
Yeah.
That turn. And I've just lost, so between the Flamers, the Chariot, and the Gaunt Summoner, which were all destroyed that turn, and losing the Gaunt Summoner functionally means losing the Balewind to some extent, and its bonuses, because no one else is good on it.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay with the change thing, but it's really the Gaunt Summoner, the benefits from it, meant that it was like 500, 600 points in the hole. Like, it was like, okay. So, I knew that, I had to get mortal wounds out to start clearing some stuff up. I also knew that I could realistically charge your general with the Ogre Thaumaturge, and the Thaumaturge does mortal wounds when he charges.
Yeah, it's good.
So, it was unlikely that I wasn't going to hurt him. Failing that turn would have been disastrous. But I realised as well that, like, I just had to start getting the wounds out. I did not have a great spellcasting turn, which didn't help. So I got, I do think I managed to kill. The way I ended up splitting it was I didn't think that my shooting would get through into the Retributors because of their armor and the amount of wounds they have.
Yeah.
Like, in a useful way. So I poured my shooting into the Vanguard Hunters, but only managed to kill one of them, I think, with everything.
Yeah, they have the same save as the Retributor. They're all 4+.
Yeah, it's just the wounds. It's just the wound count.
Yeah, having 2 wounds each.
So it just, like, I needed models off the board rather
Sure.
than, like, damage can matter later, but I just wanted stuff gone.
Yeah.
So I threw the shooting in them and I threw all of my damage spells into the Retributors. The Lord of Change's damage spells. Lord of Change is a very, very reliable spellcaster because the way it works is you roll 2 dice as normal, but then you change the result of the lower dice to match the higher dice.
And he gets loads of bonuses to cast as well.
Yeah, and he gets loads of bonuses to cast, and it's like +1 to cast, and then
expect,
just by
yeah.
being him. So he's a very reliable spellcaster, particularly for the harder spells to cast, the high damage stuff. But Tzeentch spells are a little bit swingy. Like, that's, so, the two, like, so for example, like, so one of the spells, the Gateway, which is his spell, is you roll 9 dice, and for each one of them that beats a certain value, you do a mortal wound. So it could potentially be on, if he's undamaged, it's roll 9 dice, and every 3 up is a mortal wound.
Yeah, that's really good.
Which is really good. But because you managed to hurt him, it was onto a 4 up. But it only did 1 wound in the end. So that was just, like,
Yeah, that was lucky.
actually, no, that one did kill a, yes, no, I'm wrong. That one did enough wounds. I did, like, how many wounds does a Retributor have? 3. It did 4. I remember it did 4 because one guy fell into space, but the other guy was just only mostly in space.
Yeah.
And then it did Tzeentch's Firestorm, which was the one that only did 1 wound, which is like, because that's, you roll, 9 dice and every 6 is D3 mortal wounds. And I rolled 1 6.
Yeah,
and
then
then I rolled
rolled
a 1. And so it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's Firestorm, but not a lot. So that was like, I don't know what the average damage output of Lord of Change in terms of mortal wounds should be. 5 felt a bit like lower end, but it doesn't really matter. That's just variant stuff. But it was like, it was feeling like cagey. Like I was already on the ropes. This is my second turn. So it was like, have to wait for the pushback kind of thing. And it did kind of come in some ways because the Thaumaturge charged your general. The mortal wounds were useful. He was fucking terrible in melee. Like
he rolled terrible.
He hits on a 3 and it was just 1s and 2s. So I couldn't just like wah, wah, wah. I was using my Herald to bring the horrors back because unfortunately I rolled no 1s on my Destiny dice, which meant I couldn't get some Battle Shock 1s on my pink horrors, which sort of changed the way I played subtly. There's a lot of other little mini things like that going on. But what I did do this turn, the only other important decision is I used all of my Destiny dice 6s to save the Thaumaturge.
Oh yeah.
Because the reasoning for that in my head was he was on 1 wound. By this point your general was on 4 wounds. Thaumaturge has a spell which, if it's successfully cast, does D6 mortal wounds. He also can fight. Also, you can't, like, if I get a double turn now, which was possible, he will get to fight again, and he does have multiple multi-rend weapons. I just kept missing with all of them.
Yeah, he's quite good.
So I figured it's not out of the question. Also, he gets more powerful. Oh, I did forget this.
Yeah.
He gets more powerful when he's low on health, so I should have been adding to hit to that, but we'll deal with that another time when I remember. He also should have been healing a wound every turn. I forgot that. So there's a lot of there's a lot of reasons, a lot of rules I forget with him.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, so the thought was, even though you'd think it'd be logical to keep the 6s back for something else, I felt I was so close to losing that if I don't get this double turn, it's probably over.
Yeah.
Like if you got one more turn, you're just going to roll me completely. And then thank God I got the double 10.
Yeah.
So, it was one of those interesting games where it's like, I went, then you went twice, then I went twice.
Yeah.
And then my second turn was a lot better. Unfortunately, the Ogre Thaumaturge, failed to cast a spell, failed to hit with all of his weapons, and then died.
Yeah. That's a shame.
Yeah, which is just the way it goes. I mean, I should have remembered that he goes enraged, it gets enraged if he's low on health. I should have remembered that he heals a wound every turn. But that wouldn't have saved him because he got more wounds to death anyway. But like,
yeah, it was brutal.
and then, but I did manage to do quite a lot of damage to the Retributors. Like, I felt like I'd learned how to hold them in place and awkwardly split them with the Screamers and the Pink Horrors so they couldn't move.
Yeah.
And shoot at them and cast spells at them and just pour fire into them. But they take a long time to go down. Like, I got them to, I got you to 2 left, I think, but they just
very,
well, no, hang on, it was, that was the turn because obviously I activated the Thaumaturge first so he could do his thing. And then you activated your Retributors. And you did 9 mortal wounds with the Starsoul Maces and then Exploding Hammers, because that was the turn of the Exploding Hammers. That's the one I'm remembering. Right?
Oh, I see.
Right, like where just everything sort of started blowing up. So it was 9 mortal wounds to the Horrors, which killed all the Horrors.
Yep, the Pink Horrors died.
And then you got exploding stuff from the General. I mean, the Thaumaturge was fucked anyway, but like.
Yeah, and the General exploded. When he hits on the 6, like it does 2 mortal wounds just immediately. That's what Lightning Hammers do.
I got some really good shooting that turn though, I think, because I did a lot of damage to the Judicators as well.
Yeah.
We had one thing that, was funny, did happen twice, is you rolled 2 6s in a row for Battle Shock to your Retributors.
Oh,
you had them all run away.
Then,
only to remember both times that they were in range of your General for his command ability, which means they don't have to pass Battle Shock test.
That was really lucky because they're only just in range as well. That could have been dreadful because I'd have lost multiple Retributors. So they're very expensive. Like, you really don't want to be losing any to Battle Shock ever.
Yeah, so it was very unlucky for you to roll 6 twice. It was just like, and then to remember.
No one gives a shit.
Yeah. And then, so I managed to kind of reduce you, and also by damaging your General, a couple of turns in a row, and winning the roll for which direction the storm went.
Oh, yeah.
I managed to push the storm all the way back to the middle of the board.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly anyone's game, because you still have the Stormcast nuclear bomb in space, so it hasn't even come down yet. But I had managed to kind of,
You fended off the Retributors.
The Retributors and when we first started playing, that like Retributor assault, I couldn't stop it. And it would just roll through my entire army. And I did actually manage to stop it, hold it down for long enough to kill it, or get it close to dead, while not having lost totally everything. But then, but then it was your turn.
Yeah. So it's basically the story of just very slowly shooting a Lord of Change is probably the best way to take on a Lord of Change, really. So my little kind of core of shooting, that they were lucky enough just to be able to do what they wanted for the entire game. So they just kept on relentlessly pouring arrows into the bird and took him down fairly significantly, I think.
You killed him.
Yeah,
you
killed
him. You did 9 wounds to him with shooting.
So what happened was you used those 2 6s from your Destiny pool to save Thaumaturge's life, which was a good decision. But as soon as you run out of Destiny dice or don't have high Destiny dice, I can use the Star-Fated Arrow, because I know that you can't just Destiny dice save
That's
against
true, yeah.
it. So I was waiting for that, and once that went off, the next turn, I loosed the Star-Fated Arrow, and you still have to hit and stuff, and you still get a save, but it did go through, and ended up doing, it's 3 plus D6 wounds. So,
you only did 4 wounds.
But I rolled 1, but still 4 out of
But then
nowhere.
the Eagle attacked
the
Lord
Eagle,
of Change.
however, yeah. The Eagle exploded a few times, because the Eagle, when they roll a 6 wound, they just get rend 3.
Yeah.
Because they just
That happened twice, didn't
peck
it?
through reality. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, between that, the Eagle almost killed him. The Eagle was like,
Got him to 1 wound.
1 wound. But those Vanguard Hunters who were in combat with the Pink Horrors, were within range of their bolts and crossbows, and I think there were 3 or 4 of them left, and they just, in a hail of bolt fire, managed to finally take it down. Which, was good because I was scared of it.
Yeah, and then you lightning charioted the Herald up into the oculum, from which he dooted at the ground, at the scenery that the Lord of Change had been standing on.
Yeah.
Which killed, like some pink horrors. Killed a Judicator, am I right about that? No.
It killed, probably killed one of the
Hurt a Vanguard Hunter.
Yeah.
And badly wounded the Herald.
So it was such a weird mental image, like a man with a horn and a lightning chariot, like being teleported into a building so he can honk at a piece of scenery that then explodes, killing, one of his own nearby troops.
But explodes in a way that doesn't mean he isn't removed.
Yeah. It stays there forever.
Yeah.
Exploding forever.
It was mad. So I thought at this point that I had lost the game because the Lord of Change was gone and the Celestant Prime hadn't even come down yet.
Yeah, I think you pretty much had lost the game by that point.
Yes, I think I had. But then I won the roll off. Yeah, won the roll off the next one. So with a sort of sequential turn order. Because it would have been over if I and so I tried to sort of like mount a kind of valiant defense with the Herald and the Sorcerer Lord and the remaining pink horrors. Did manage to kill the rest of the Vanguard Hunters and move them into position to charge the surviving Retributor. At which point I cast a spell that is fun called Arcane Suggestion at the Retributors, which you roll a dice, play the sorcerer, basically something whispers in their ear. You roll a dice, on a 4 up, nothing happens. On a 1, they start attacking themselves. On a 2, they drop their weapons. On a 3, they turn around and it lowers their save. And I got the turn around result. So the Retributors kind of just, like, literally, in a moment of absolute crisis, the Greater Demon of Zinch had just been shot to death with crossbows next to him. The Chaos Sorcerer just points and goes, "What's that?" And all the Retributors, the 2 surviving Retributors turn around. Shooting, I think, managed to kill
one of the Retributors.
So there's only one left.
One
and
star
obviously -1 save is obviously a big deal.
Yeah.
And the Herald isn't great in combat, but the disc isn't terrible. And I figure he's only got 2 wounds or something. I can charge in with the Herald, take the initiative, and, kill the Retributor. Get that at least. So I charge in with the Herald, miss with absolutely everything. At which point the Retributor just turns around with the Star Soul Mace automatic mortal wounds.
Just D3
and just blows his face off.
Yeah.
And so I almost imagine it like almost like a kind of Grand Slam, like baseball kind of thing. Like I'm sailing in on a
Sailing back out
disc,
again.
like, bang, gone.
Yeah, he died.
Yeah, he died. And it was apparently at this point that the Celestant Prime decided that they desperately needed his help.
So you had a unit of pink horrors left and the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. And, though we both completely forgot about the Changeling because he was just in the corner of the board.
Yeah, the Changeling didn't change. So to clarify, the Changeling was there, but he chased after Tom's army for the entire game, failing to cast spells.
Yes, that was his story.
He did 1 wound to the to the Heralder at the last turn of the game.
Yeah, which didn't help anyone. So he decided to bring the Prime down because, like, we've been waiting for this titanic showdown between these 2 monstrous, extraordinary kind of creatures, representatives of our respective gods. But the thing he'd been sent to kill was already dead. Like, he'd already been shot by hunters, like the lowliest just battle line of, the Vanguard. So he decided to go after the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, who is the most scared looking little chap. Celestant Prime comes down, he drops a meteor on the head of the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, and he's basically fine with that. He takes 1 mortal wound. But
he dives out the way of that one.
Yeah, he dodges that bullet, but then does get charged by the glowing incarnation of Sigmar's Wrath and hit with the Warhammer 8 times. He missed a few, but
yeah, you because the Celestant Prime can choose to like change one of its dice results once a turn, and you were like sat there kind of looking at the result, like figuring out how much. Whether or not you should use it then to change one of your results, and you did, and you calculated it. And then you over-damaged me by about like 8 wounds. You did like 14 wounds with 1 attack or something.
Yeah, so he has no saves, and it's 3 damage per attack. So if you hit, like, 2 of those things, he's dead.
He's dead as hell.
He's really the deadest he's ever been. Like, he does find a way to come back, but he'd been zapped with Galmaraz now, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I should retire him now. So
he's been so
a lore fact is that the Celestant Prime is special because being hit with with Galmaraz is enough to separate the good parts of someone's soul from the corrupted chaos parts of someone's soul. So if someone is deemed worthy by Sigmar, you can be a chaos champion, get killed by Galmaraz, and come back as a Stormcast.
It's true, yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like he's too much of a shit for that.
Is there anything good in him?
No,
I don't think
he's supposed
so.
to be rubbish.
Yeah,
So, but it'd be lame for me to say that at that point the Lord of Change just sort of reaches through time and space and snatches him back out, which is what I've been saying has been happening previously every time he's died.
Yeah.
So God knows, maybe canonically this is his end. He just gets absolutely annihilated by the Celestial Prime.
Obliterated all of
And his soul kind of gets halfway up to Sigmar and then just sort of falls back down again.
Fucked it.
Yeah.
That was pretty much game over. I think I just shot the pink horrors to death. And
You shot the pink horrors to death. You killed all the screamers, and the changeling was left alone on the other side of the board,
going whoops.
Actually, peace.
Backing away slowly.
So, to be honest, it was a complete dumpstering. I was resolutely put in a big old bin, but it was fun.
It was really fun, and it was weird how it played out because I didn't have 320 points of Celestial Prime on the board for any.
I did have my army was 180 points smaller than yours, so the differential was about 100 points. Yeah. And without the vortex, it was actually exactly the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, I think we both played it reasonably well, but I'm not sure what you could have done to stop the Retributor burst, because you have to throw everything at the Retributors. That's the trouble with them. Even the Retributors die, which is obviously 400 odd points of stuff, they take a long time to die. You have to hit them with all the immortal wound stuff. You have to shoot them with everything.
I tell you what, you did two things really well. One was you kept your heroes out on my death bubble. And I think, like I said earlier, I think I swung a little bit low on the whole mortal wound factory that the Lord Change is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think you should probably be doing more than 5 mortal wounds a turn.
Yeah.
Worth clarifying, the FAQ means I can't Destiny dice mortal wounds anymore, which is a thing.
Yeah, that's true.
But even then, I don't really want to be pouring them. In terms of, bang per buck, I want to be using those, the potential for up to, if Firestorm of Tzeentch really goes off and I roll 9 dice, and for every 6, that's D3 mortal wounds. That's potentially insane, right?
Yeah.
It's really swingy. Doing 1 wound with it is obviously second to shittest.
Yes.
But it could go, hypothetically, there's 27 mortal wounds there.
Yeah, it could have blown them up, yeah.
And so, obviously that could swing. But really, I want to be using those spells to just remove heroes.
Yeah,
they just
definitely.
get annihilated. And that's one of the reasons the Gaunt Summon is important, because he's really good against groups. So he should be up on the Bellwind Vortex, throwing those spells down on him. So that was a big loss. I think if I'd had everything, I probably could have mortal wounds them down a little bit faster, but that goes without saying. It's worth saying that, my Flamers never fired, my Burning Chariot never fired, Gaunt Summoner popped 1 Retributor and then turned into a paste. So there was a lot of hypothetical damage built into the list that just never happened. I think that's
it's that double turn that I got, which did for you really, because you had all that damage on that one flank, and the Fulminators failed their charge, but still, the shooting, the Spitz attack alone is doing damage. The general's actually quite good in combat, even though he does tend to die. I was able to, and with shooting as well, the Stormcast shooting is just really good. It's really it's hard for Tzeentch to get out of the way of that.
Yeah, and I can't. I can experiment with bringing more shield spells and things in, but it is a trade-off, right? I think one thing I'll do is I'll put some of the more of the shielding spells on people. For example, there's some stuff that didn't really pay off, you were -1 to hit my Lord of Change in the combat phase, but I didn't commit him to fight, and I think that's something I probably should have done. What I should have done is thrown him into the hunters.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
To kill them.
Also, there's a chance you can block. There's a big building there. There's a chance you could have arranged it so that I couldn't shoot you, just by being on the other side.
He's a big
large
bird.
Though, yeah, he's big.
It was a semi-porous building, and he's a very big bird.
Yeah, I'm sure you could shoot a Starfated arrow through an Orrery. Not an Orrery, whatever
It's definitely not an Orrery, Tom. Careful there.
The Oculum is like a big spherical, just a weird piece of magic technology.
But yeah, so this was a fun one. We got, I like I kind of feel like we kind of need to have that Lord of Change Prime showdown.
It's got to happen at
another
some point.
time, because he just showed up to beat up a tiny man and then left.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the significance of that. Maybe that Chaos Lord would have gone on to do terrible, amazing things.
I think I might say that he's canon dead now. That's his end.
Yeah.
It's just we might do battles from a different point in time.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good idea. Yeah,
that's canonically he dies at that point.
You get hit by Kelmaraz, you stay hit by
Yeah,
Kelmaraz.
maybe I'll make a Stormcast army one day and there'll be one fucking rubbish Stormcast.
Maybe I should, maybe I could add like, an errant quest or something, and that would be his.
Yeah, it would have to be I'm trying to think what kind of hero he would come back as, because he can't be, just pick your shittest Liberator Prime.
That's him. Yeah, that's him.
I don't know. Yeah, he's supposed to have been a musician, so maybe he comes back as a heralder.
Oh, well, I could add a second herald to me.
Oh, no, don't do that. I just can't believe I just talked you into that. No.
Man, there are 2 different models for that. I like that as well.
That's not a reason to have more Doot. I can't take any more Doot.
I love Dr. Doots. He's my man.
I know. But yeah, that was this week's battle. And that was good.
Yeah,
it's nice to have big arms. I'm going to be obviously a bit busy with tournament prep in the short term, but I want to try and finish the rest of my train board so we can do a full 6x4.
Yeah, lovely.
Because that will change the dynamic of certain things as
Yeah,
well.
definitely.
Like doing this sort of 1500 point battle on a 4x4 board obviously compresses things a lot. Makes terrain terrifyingly. I do think it ups the threat of those heralders.
Yeah,
because there's nowhere I can go. Like realistically.
It's true.
Like I can't
Very hard to avoid.
Yeah. Not to go back, yeah, because I do think they're fine, but I do think their impact is amplified with the kinds of games we're playing, like loads of models in a small space with terrain
down.
Because we want it to look good. But then each thing we put down, this will look great here. And it's like, I mean, that, it didn't actually happen in this game, but it almost did. Like, I've got my, like, dais piece of terrain, that actually turns out fits my Lord of Change base really snugly. So I made him stand on it because it looks good. And I didn't realize, and I was hoping, like, it's a really low flat piece of terrain. Let's hope Tom doesn't think that thematically it makes sense to honk at this because I'm fucked.
He never quite did.
No, he didn't need to in the end. But I knew, like, that was how he dies. He's like, you honk at the steps he's standing on.
Yeah,
I do feel like that's one of the sort of logically flimsiest abilities in the game.
Yeah.
The fact that it doesn't remove the terrain is the thing for me, I think.
Yeah, especially for, like, I can imagine masonry exploding and taking people out and stuff.
Totally.
But then, it's a ruin that's left afterwards, isn't it? It's not it's so ruined at some point that surely it's not going to explode again.
Yeah, exactly.
What happens like
Also, like, honking at the floor.
Pond. Yeah, something like that. I mean, just an innocent pond.
It's a magic horn.
It is
can do
magic.
whatever it likes.
It is magic.
Yeah, it was also the best mental image.
He's great.
He is. I hate him.
He's very good. We'll have new scenarios, we'll have open play, we'll have, if we have a bigger board as well, then that's rad. It was fun putting down, I basically brought almost all my Stormcast to Chris's house today and seeing them all lined up was pretty rad.
Seeing them lined up against each other was great as well.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah.
It looks really awesome.
We should crack on and do some questions, Tom, because we've got loads of questions. So, do our best to get through every question we've received in the past month. They've all been really good, which is great from a questions point of view. But obviously it means we've got quite a lot of questions and not a load of time, so we'll crack on.
Indeed.
We'll see how we get on. Our first question was posted to me on Discord by Universal, who writes, one of the best things about the pod is hearing this emerging narrative between you and Tom's forces. Given how you see the AOS setting as an open sandbox to create in, would it be interesting to either of you to engage your writing talents and create some written fiction based on the events?
Yeah, definitely. I've come up with a few ideas, but never actually just sat down and done it really. I had a good idea for a short story set on in a town of the culture where the moon changes phases and each phase of the moon is a different chaos god, and that changes the behavior of the society under it. So that the society goes through like a hunting phase and then a feasting phase and then a kind of a dying phase and then comes back
pooping phase.
Yeah, and then the steady pooping forever phase. And this is the colour of the moon and the kind of the behaviour they've built their entire society around it. So it's expected that in the phase of dreaming, which would be Tzeentch, like people just like in a daze wander out into the fields and build fucking crazy magic artifacts. And then the society almost has to wake up and deal with what the fuck,
Yeah,
all
it's really nice
all
to
this
do.
mad stuff. And then the idea would be like Stormcast going into that situation and 2 different Stormcast. So the Celestial Vindicators are extremely hardcore anti-chaos.
Yeah.
And they would want to just...
That's what my Night Questor is.
Oh, yeah. Their approach would be just to obliterate this. It's obviously chaos, but I wanted them to kind of come up against some hunters who had more of a nuanced understanding of what that civilization was. And like, do you just wipe it out or do you try and save them or help them? And so, yeah, the realms are really kind of interesting setting for like finding ways of kind of exploring human nature and also writing fun passages where people beat the shit out of each other with the guns.
Yeah.
It's that winning combination of things.
So I did write a short story, won a little competition.
Yeah.
For the Endless Deserts thing. I must have mentioned this on the pod before. For the, which Tyler Mengel did, which was his sort of unofficial Tomb King's battle tome. I wrote a bit of fiction, that sort of won a competition related to that, about sort of, death and Tzeentch, essentially, and that relationship and the, the way that I wanted to write something about what it means to be like a mortal servant of death. So not, everyone thinks of those undead armies like Tomb Kings and things as just being skeletons, but I like the idea that because, the AOS setting recontextualized Nagash particularly as like an actual god, not just a baddie. Like he's the god of the dead. And the realm of death isn't just full of skeletons. People live there. There are cities and civilizations there. Shadespire is one of them. I wanted to try and explore like what it, or like write about like what the attitudes of human, mortal followers of death would be, whose kings are literally skeletons.
Yeah.
That are still animated in some way. And so that's the story set after, the defeat of Nagash by Archaon.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's kind of like basically a dogmatic crisis because the skeletons start to crumble, but the humans are left alive. And that's kind of, so that's kind of what it's about. Right. So it's about, it's only 2,500 words. I'll post the link in the show notes. It's about, a group of like servants of the dead. So like humans trying to escape. And I've never been a big like writer of combat scenes and stuff. I want to try and figure that out. I've always been like more into like moods and things, but, because literally their masters have turned into skeletons, right? They've just crumbled to the ground. It's a pressing religious concern to get them away from the followers of Khorne.
Yeah.
Who will collect all of the skulls. And which I never really frame it in that silly terms, but I kind of wanted that image of like, they have to like, carry them in these huge funeral runs and just run basically and try and escape and send their own acolytes out to die so that they can get away.
Yeah.
But the story is also about how it may or may not be the case that my favorite Chaos God is manipulating events in some way in order to advance his own objectives in the realm of death. Yeah. So that was kind of what that was about. And that hasn't really factored into my army much. I thought for a while that maybe that would be my Lord of Change and my stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's more that it's my like, my kind of the way I think about how that should look like starlight and kind of these sort of radiant lights and things kind of play into it a little tiny bit. I did start writing a second, because this sort of fell through, but I was originally supposed to be sort of expanding that story for the battle tome for like a fiction companion, but as far as I know, that fiction companion never happened. So obviously if he wants to get back in touch and make that happen, I'm fine with it. And then the idea was to spin that out into a full cycle of stories, one for each Chaos God.
Oh, right.
Which would cover the distance from that first story, which takes place right at the beginning of the Age of Chaos, all the way to the beginning of the Age of Sigmar. And so I wrote most of the Khorne one, which is about basically a bloodbound warband walking into this endless desert where everything is dead. Basically, like trying to find something to kill. So the idea of like almost starving, like the previous story is about the followers of the dead wasting away in the desert because their thing has been taken away. Yes. This is like Khorne, like deprived of all of its, like, Khorne followers want blood and honorable combat and skulls, and there's nothing, There's nothing. They're having to like kill their own, but not in a way that sheds too much blood because they need to drink the blood.
Yeah.
So they can't be Cornish. Cornish? They can't be
They
Cornish.
can't be Cornish.
You can't be Cornish.
Yep.
So yeah, I hadn't really made too much progress with that. I'd like to do more specific fiction for armies and things, but I think there's also you want to leave things open a bit because, like I just said, I like the idea that my Sorcerer Lord just died because that was what happened in the game.
Yeah.
And we can obviously, figure some things out in terms of playing games. If I want to use him in a game, then we can just set the battle at any time, and being Chaos versus Stormcast makes that easy. But if I'd written a story, if I had a particular narrative aim for him, then I don't know what I would do. Yeah. But I want to do more of that stuff.
Cause it's a fun setting, isn't it, as well? It's really, really nice.
Yeah, super open. And it's sort of, it's high fantasy stuff, but there's enough sort of like high fantasy logic to the universe that you can twist in interesting ways that you kind of want to play with it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I've been thinking a lot about like what it looks like for a Stormcast to fail. and be reforged and still fail, and what that really means for them personally, and what it means for their, Sigmar's view of them. Do people who fall out of favor just not get remade and that kind of thing? Like just kind of getting into with the Stormcast a little bit more.
Yeah.
Kind of examining what their perspective is.
My idea for a Stormcast army back when was to do Celestial Vindicators, but do them as Stormcast that will not accept the fact that Stormcast is bringing back Chaos Champions, because they're really hardline. They're very angry.
Yeah.
Like, as far as they're concerned, there should be no redemption. So, to have like basically extremely angry Celestial Vindicators, but like, and have it be Vanguard heavy. So the idea is that they've walked off into the wilderness, basically, like almost in protest. Like, they're not having this. Yeah. Like, they're off doing their own thing.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know if I'll get around to that, because that's one, it's just another project idea on the pile of project ideas.
Add it to the binder.
Yeah. I think that answers that question. Mm-hmm. Next question is from Ben, who writes, no doubt you've discussed the announcement of Star Wars Legion on this month's pod, but I wanted to ask if Legion is the Star Wars minis game you want. Large infantry battles is an aside of the Star Wars universe that particularly interests me. They're certainly entertaining to watch. But if there's one aspect of the Star Wars films that grips me, it's the climactic battles between Sith and Jedi. Legion isn't out yet, so we don't really know how it will play, but personally I'd like to have seen a smaller scale game similar to that of the Batman and the up-and-coming Harry Potter games, pitting the many characters of the Star Wars universe against each other, Boba versus Han, Leia versus Jabba, Luke versus the Wampa, and so on. If there was any one aspect of the Star Wars universe that should have been captured in a tabletop minis game, would a large-scale infantry game be the top of your list? Cheers, guys. Really do enjoy the show. Michael, hang on. Ben. It's from Ben. I got that wrong. Michael is the next question. Spoilers. So it's worth it. I kind of wanted to read this part as a PSA. The game you're describing is Imperial Assault, which is exactly that. Jabba even has a miniature if you want a big fat slug man.
Nice.
If you have a little plague bearer ride him, if you like. Yeah, I mean, if you want Star Wars heroes fighting each other, that is Imperial Assault. Like, exactly. In fact, I think, interestingly, I can't, to flip this question on its head, I don't know if I can think of a Star Wars miniatures game that doesn't exist with Legion. Legion seems to fill the gap.
Yeah.
I don't know if, I mean, so you have X-Wing for dogfights, Armada for fleet battles, Legion for armies, and Imperial Assault for skirmishes between heroes.
Yeah.
So
that's all covered.
What else is there? When he said sort of Jedi versus Sith encounters, I thought like a melee combat kind of dueling game would be an interesting way to do it. I don't know if it would justify miniatures necessarily, more like a card game, but
might be more like Inquisitor, that old range of, where they did like large scale miniatures. I can't remember what the scale was, but it was like a few inches high rather than just like one of it.
Tell you what, I'd play Star Wars Necromunda set in Mos Eisley.
No, that'd be right. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
You make gangs and they fight.
Yeah, that'd be great.
There you go.
There you go. Sorted.
Next question is indeed from Michael. I don't know why I said it like that. Who writes, this is going to begin the beginning of a theme of people trying to adapt our names to the armies we collect. It's going to go in a few weird places before we get there. Messrs. Zinchton and Celestior.
Celestior.
Which I believe is a combination of Celestin and Senior.
Yes.
It's Celestior, but it's all gone a bit Skeletor.
Yeah, I like it. I might name one of my heroes Celestior after that.
Can that be what my sorcerer
Your
comes back as?
Sorcerer. Yeah, the Dr. Doots Part 2.
Celestior. I'm just about to embark on building my first army, for which I've chosen the Stormcast Eternals. I came quite quickly to the idea of a Roman-inspired colour scheme of red and steel, which I'm now pretty sure I'm going to use. But for a while I wasn't certain if red was a good idea on Stormcast, as all the pictures have, or at least had, them fighting the red dudes of Khorne. In the end, I figured they'd mostly be seen on their own or with each other's armies, or with other people's armies, which could be anything. And also now Stormcast versus Nurgle is a bigger thing anyway. How much do you consider the colour schemes of other armies, your own, your likely opponents, and canonical opponents when choosing a colour scheme? Michael. Which is Rogue Michael on our lovely, lovely Discord.
I think I'd be worried about it if all I had was the starter box and I was going to play these two armies and, wouldn't want to just get red fatigue after a while. But I wouldn't necessarily worry about it independently of that. Because I think the silhouette's so different and the whole chunky deal is so different to Khorne that, I think they'd look significantly different even if they were the same colour.
Yeah, I agree. I don't consider other people's armies because there's no getting around that really.
No.
I do think about so I'll put it this way. I've thought about one context, which is if I think I'm likely to kind of want to build out around a faction rather than like a very specific type of unit, which isn't really the case in AOS because I'm just all in on Tzeentch. But in 40k, I'd like to get some Space Marines, and then I kind of want to an Imperial Knight one day, and I kind of want maybe to get some Sisters of Silence, or if they ever do Plastic Sisters of Battle, going that way.
Oh yeah, right.
And I have in my head color schemes for all of those things, and I want them to be complementary in a way that they would pop against each other. So, I wouldn't, for example, do a black, Space Marine chapter. They're all out because I know that I would quite like to do, black armored, Sisters of Battle.
Yeah.
If that happens. So that means that a Space Marine color in yellow or green, for example, would pop nicely against them. I also know that I have a Knight household color scheme in mind, which would be like red, maroon, and white.
Oh, cool.
Blue, maroon, and white, like sea blue kind of thing. Which again would pop against those other colors. So I've planned them relative to each other, but they're all like pie in the sky ideas, really. Like at the moment, I don't have a particular thing where I plan it that way.
No.
But nonetheless, I think it's good to think about so you don't back yourself into a corner too much.
Yeah, agreed.
But similarly, like having yellow Imperial Fists would probably mean that I didn't do any Custodes, because I think yellow and gold would look a bit off next to each other. Whereas if I do Salamanders, I might, because green and gold go very naturally next to each other.
Yeah, and Custodes have to be gold as well. That's one of those things.
Speaking of the Imperium of Man, our next question comes from Pete, who writes, I've recently read, or more accurately had someone read to me via recording, he means an audiobook obviously, 1,000 Suns, the first Horus Heresy book dedicated to, surprise, the 1,000 Suns Legion. It got me thinking about how the about the Imperium and how it could have been and how it ended up turning out. Prospero is unquestionably a nice place to live, at least on the surface. Advanced healthcare, lovely cities, good infrastructure, the protection of probably the least objectionable of the Imperium's genetically enhanced super soldiers. Is there an alternate history of the Imperium where the 1,000 Suns remained loyal and helped steer the Imperium in a slightly less dystopian direction? Or is their hubris about continuing to use their psychic powers always going to result in some bad stuff happening? Lawfully yours, Fienia/Pete. This is kind of like one of those big, like, one of the biggest what ifs. Yeah. Really. And it's quite similar to the other big what if, which is like, what if Horus didn't?
Yeah, didn't Horus.
Yeah, because actually, what happens to the 1,000 Suns and what happens to Horus are linked, very intrinsically linked, but they're not, Horus pushes the button on Prospero to some extent, but it's almost like a sideshow to the rest of the Horus Heresy in some ways.
Yeah.
And Gilliman even says in the new book that he thinks what happened with Magnus was a huge shame and a mistake and lost them a potential ally.
Yeah.
It does feel like, so the one thing that gets sort of flexed in the lore is like how much Tzeentch was directly involved with all of this. Because if you have Tzeentch directly making this happen, it feels like it can't be avoided in some ways. Like it was literally their fate because he's the master of fate and that's how it goes.
How that works.
But I guess the flip side to that is it's all about the Imperium's attitude to Psykers, where if they, and then the question is, if they were more lenient, then they probably would have, the 1,000 Suns probably wouldn't have revolted or like wouldn't have been pushed into what happened.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of well-documented problems that happen if you use your mind powers too much.
Yeah. Lots of people turning into demons, being consumed by the warp. Yeah, I guess like, the thing is like the Imperium uses Psykers all the time. They have a whole program put in place for finding them and turning them into food for the Emperor or into warriors who can actually control their psychic powers. So the whole bureaucracy is designed to bring up Psykers and find them. And, there's a massive hypocrisy at the heart of the Prospero story, which is what's so agonizing about it. The idea that the Imperium just went through a little phase of disliking Psykers. Actually doesn't really.
Well, it still does officially.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Like, I think that's the thing. Like, it's hard to imagine. I suspect, for example, I suspect the version of the universe where the 1,000 Suns don't fall, the Black Templars never exist. Because they are kind of on a crusade against all of that stuff. They don't use Psykers. And I suppose there's two things there are two ways in which this is extremely Warhammery. One is that obviously it's a terrible, agonizing thing to imagine what could have happened, but also it feels like there's no way it couldn't have happened given everything. Like, it feels like humanity was set up to fail, which is the kind of one of the predominant themes of 40k, right? Like, it's almost worse that they are struggling on because everything is set up against them. Like, the Chaos Gods are more powerful the more you believe in them, so the Emperor keeps them a secret, and that allows his sons to fall. Like, if the Emperor had said, okay, we can use psychic powers, but you have to be super careful because there are these 4 bad dudes, ask the Eldar, then maybe that helps a bit, but then you just get those people going like, well, what do you know? I'm going to worship those guys.
Yeah,
and then,
sure.
you know what I mean? Like, it feels like there's no easy way out necessarily. Like, you know, would it be better if the Thousand Sons were allowed to study their abilities and learn more about them? Yes. Would they have found an answer to chaos? Probably not. Like, the only race that comes close is like the Necrons.
Yeah.
Look how they turned out. Like,
Yeah, it's true.
And, you know, there are lots of visual links between the Necrons and the Thousand Sons. So, like, yeah, don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if they just stayed loyal, that would have been a massive boon to the Imperium.
I think
but,
Horus would have lost the war
that's true.
sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if Magnus successfully persuaded Horus not to go Horus, then that would have also helped. But I think, like, places like Ultramar are a better model of, like, what a better Imperium could look like. Now Grimmon's back. It's actually structured. It's actually got, you know, hospitals and stuff and infrastructure. And, you know, Prospero was nice, but it seems like that you couldn't roll that out at scale across the Imperium because there's too much kind of grunt work needed. Someone has to make the stuff and someone has to, you know, make the guns and, you know, build the ships. And Prospero is never the place where that happens. Like, you've got to have your hive worlds as well. So there's always going to be the dark side to the Imperium.
Yeah, I mean, one of my other, like, brainworm army things is there's Zawar Kad is the Forge world that the Thousand Sons brought back into compliance. So it's kind of their Forge world, and I kind of always wanted to do an army from there because the notion with them is they were kind of independent. They were officially, you know, deemed hereticus due to their connection to the Thousand Sons, but because the Horus Heresy broke out at the same time, no one had the time to murder them all. And I kind of like the idea of that as like a lost Forge world cool. with its own. They were the guys that invented the Castellan, the psychic Castellan robots that the Thousand Sons get, that they can control with their minds.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love them to do Dark Imperium. Dark Mechanicum as an actual force. I mean, there's got to be other cards, I'm sure.
Surely, yeah. Hope that tickles your lore brain.
Lots of lore.
Next comes from Mitchell, who writes, Dear Call and Calgar, which is pretty good.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
That's good.
My friends and I recently went out and got ourselves some start collecting 40k boxes. I've been a fan of the fiction for some time, but my decision to dive headfirst into the hobby was in no small part thanks to you and your wonderful pod. Aw, we've enabled somebody else. Again. I was particularly inspired by the work you put into the stories and characters of your respective armies. However, my friends and I are having trouble replicating that since 40k lacks the resurrection lore elements of AOS. My Chaos and Tyrannid friends can get away with it, but I find it hard to create character around my Guardsmen and Marines when they're getting cut down en masse every time we play. Do you have any tips for building a narrative in a world where people actually die for real? Thanks for the great discussions and tips. Love the pod. Sincerely, Mitchell. It's a tricky problem in 40k. So I think it's not a problem for Guard.
No,
but you have to be unsentimental. And accept that part of the fiction is that human beings, normal human beings, are thrown away at a rate of millions an hour in most of these wars. So your Guardsmen are just an endless replenishing stock of poorly trained, poorly armed, normal people.
I think you can do stuff with the Guard regarding like regiments with history. So the Guardsmen come in and they, they're expected to fulfill the qualities of the regiment according to how they've historically performed. So the idea that you'd be like a unit 43rder or something would mean something. It's almost about coming up with a kind of history of tradition in your Imperial Guard force and like why each unit name means something to the soldiers. And, even though there are kind of faceless soldiers going up and fulfilling those roles, they're still going to have character because they're still going to be kind of fulfilling that part of the history of the regiment.
I think thinking of it, zooming out a little bit, not thinking of it as like these are these 12 dudes and here are their names. That's a good scale for Necromunda or for Shadow War or something like that.
Yeah.
Thinking of it in terms of like, a regiment and its history, because there's a bit in, Dark Imperium, the novel, where like it's been 150 years since the Gathering Storm events where Cadia is destroyed and all that stuff. Which for the Space Marines is nothing. Like for Guilliman, that's nothing. But there's a bit where like a sort of veteran soldier is reminiscing about his grandfather's memories of Cadia. And he is still like a former Cadian guardsman, he's still part of that tradition. But the battle that is like, 2 campaigns ago for the Space Marines was 2 generations ago for the guardsmen that they're serving with. So that's another way of thinking about it.
That's
like
cool,
if your battles are separated in time, it means one thing for the Space Marines and it means another thing for the guardsmen, who by 3 battles down the line are probably the grandchildren of the people you have in the first place. But you can play with that. Space Marines is tricky. I think Primaris specifically is trickier because they've established that they are a precious, relatively finite thing. And also that Space Marine companies have a fixed number of people in them. So like, where are they coming from? I think you just have to kind of replenish them from reserve companies and things like that.
Yeah.
Also though, I mean, to be fair, two things help with Space Marines. One is that they are really tough. Like, down for Space Marine means can't keep fighting
That's
now.
true. Yeah.
It doesn't mean dead as everything. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it depends how they die. But yeah, like, you can have Space Marines survive. Like, a lot of people get buildings dropped on them in the Horus Heresy books, and they're all right.
Yeah,
Like,
they do survive.
the other side of it is that, you know, apothecaries come along and they take the glands out of, you know, out of your head and they stick it in someone else. So if you wanted to transfer like personality traits or like, you know, sort of again, traditions or like even looks from one Space Marine to another, the next Space Marine you have, even the guy with his helmet off, probably literally has half the genes of the last guy who looked like that.
That's true.
So
Yeah, they are quite similar.
probably explain it away. But yeah, mortality is a bitch, apparently.
Damn.
Also, I mean, if that's really important to you, like you want to name your dudes, like battle scale is probably not the place to, it's better to play like some, Kill Team or some Shadow War or something with those models.
You could do it with like you could do it with a general who just gets wounded and comes back. Like,
Yeah.
you can fudge it a little bit.
Next question comes from Dynamic Calories, who writes, "Hello, Chris, Tom, and your many thousand tiny sons. Firstly, thank you for an excellent pod, which is more or less my first pod. It's filled the audio niche I was struggling to fill during painting, along with CNC now. Secondly, a shout out to the fantastic CNC Discord and Table Talk channel, which is a lovely place to share minis and hobby love. My question is mainly focused on nostalgia. Like many people, I got into Games Workshop as a child, and being from Nottingham originally, I got to see Lenton grow from a tiny shop nestled in the side of the ominous GWHQ into the wonderful Warhammer world. Sadly, as the hobby became too expensive for a teenager with split interests to keep up with, so did my interest wane, only for it to be rekindled with the Total Warhammer Age of Sigmar combo that hooked so many people back into the hobby. So now to the point. When finishing a mini tonight, I popped open a pot of Leadbelcher, only to be hit by a smell that, in that instant, took me straight back to the old hexagonal pots of bolt gun metal, pouring over books full of evocative illustrations, technicolor miniatures, and my woeful painting skills. It also reminded me of how strange it was to have a hobby stretch back so long with such consistent setting and history, especially as my love of Skaven as a 13-year-old boy is being rewarded by them appearing in Total Warhammer 2. Total Warhammer 2. I've got it lost again. My question is this. What part of the Games Workshop universe hits you most acutely in the nostalgia gland? And are there any particular models, fiction, or even issues of White Dwarf that send you down memory lane? I could go on, but I shan't. Regards, Dynamic Calories off Discord. So for me, it's poly cement and spray paint are the two things that make me feel like I'm 14 again. Specifically, if I was going to talk about models, it would probably be a lot of the old dwarf range.
Oh yeah.
Because I used to have a bunch of dwarfs as a kid, and like that was the stuff that I put the most time into painting. So those guys really like take me back.
Nostalgia.
Also, actually, the 40k orc kit, which hasn't changed
That's
in
just the same.
like the 20 years or something.
Yeah, it's crazy they haven't updated that actually. It's quite popular. Yeah, I was basing some, my Vanguard Hunters on some slate and, I had flashbacks to the time when I based Orion, the big metal, Lord of the Hunt.
No, not a Ryan.
Not, any Ryan, the
Orion
Orion himself, is kind of king of the wood. And yeah, just like trying to keep that guy glued to that rock. It wasn't ever going to work. He just fell off every time I transported him. But it was still really fun. That was a really strange model, really cool, and should not have been made in metal. Had an enormous cape that was way too heavy and kept falling off. And
God.
a massive
Pinning metal models together is
yeah.
something no one should miss.
That's very true. Yeah. So yeah, that was a pain in the ass. Yep, the Alariel model from that same era. It's like, it's so static and weird. It's just a lady with giant butterfly wings.
So because metal models are not a thing anymore, I use a lot less super glue. I still use it, but I use a lot less than I used to. And so when I do stick myself to myself now, I get that real feeling of like, I remember this specific pain.
Yeah. That's a very specific.
Yeah. Nostalgia. I've hurt myself quite a lot last month in the pursuit of a lot of change.
Stabbed, glued.
Yeah, literally summoned with blood magic. Our next question comes from AW, who writes, "Walloping howdies, 13 and 30-year-olds. Thanks for the wonderful pod. It's dragged me back down the screaming pit of uncool that is my early adolescence. The years in between having been filled with comics, superheroes, video games, and Game of Thrones, so obviously much more cool." Hang on. He says, "Chris, I enjoyed your most recent blog post about your first minis, which is like a year ago, but Cool. The past 6 months of episodes and year of watching Critical Role has led me back in my parents' attic, where I've recovered an old Warhammer Quest box filled with variably poorly painted minis from decades past, which isn't the first time I've done this, based on the Hero Quest minis stored in the same box. As I stare at these unfinished exercises in imagination and listen to your podcast, I get quietly itchy to finish them off, and in the case of the Chaos Warrior, do it much, much better. Question 1. We'll do this one at a time. Tom, which gloss wash are you using on your Stormcast? My Bretonian Knights will thank you.
It's Reichland Flesh Shade gloss on gold. That's what that is. If you do silver, there's also a Nuln Oil gloss, which is black, but I'm not sure how that turns out.
It makes it quite dark.
Right.
Thin it if you're not sure.
Good advice.
Also, if you're trying, you can try a little bit of Drakenhof Nightshade or any coloured wash as well, because silver can
That's true,
pop out of anything.
Yeah, nice.
That's as they say, silver, it can pop out of anything. 2. With Gangs for Necromunda having been announced, I wonder if Games Workshop seem to have caught onto the diurnal variation of their punters. Perhaps they've always known. Which, as yet unre-released 90s GW fodder would you care to see again? All together now?
More time. It's very good.
Definitely more time.
Yeah.
It's interesting, so given that Skirmish exists and has sort of rules for, I'm just going to drill into this slightly. I definitely want more time anyway.
Yeah.
What is it about more time, do you think, that isn't satisfied by Skirmish, for example?
Good question. I think a lot of it is the aesthetic. I actually loved the Reichlanders with their guns and pirates and Skaven, and it's something very kind of grimy,
Enlightenment era scholars
Yeah.
fighting rats in a shit town.
A ruin. Which again is very on AOS. But I loved it. I thought it was so atmospheric, and the art in that book was beautiful as well. These kind of very black ink heavy, lots of skulls with kind of rats and snakes crawling out of them.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
There's definitely, incidentally, for crossover video game fans, there's a complete through line for me from More Time to Dishonored. They're very different things, but something of my love of both settings is I think Age of Sigmar's getting its cities, but I don't have that sense of them yet. Because they're all kind of spectacular. Where's the crap one? You know?
Where's this scummy underbelly of the...
Also, I think those races kind of coexisting. They don't coexist easily in AOS because the distances between everyone's homelands are so spread out. So that's a thing as well.
Yeah.
But more time, basically.
Yeah, it's great.
But yeah, thank you for the question. That's from AW. Our next question comes from Stu, who writes, Dear Emperor's Good Boys, which miniature did you initially dislike, but then subsequently come to love after having painted one or once you'd seen how it plays? Mine is the fetid bloat drone from the Dark Imperium box. I wrote it off as being too odd to comprehend. However, after having painted the thing, I've fallen for its bizarre anatomy and the one cartoonish bulging green eye I gave it. The poor thing really looks like it's seen some shit. Cheers for all the pods, Stu.
Maybe the Lord Veritant, which is, I never disliked the model, but I thought his pose looked quite static. Now I've actually painted him up, and I love him. I think he's one of my favourite looking Stormcast heroes. Got a nice purple star cloak on him. He's got a really cool ruined blade, and unfortunately he's crap in the game. He's really not very good.
For me, actually, I think this is Pink Horrors.
Oh yeah.
I really thought I wasn't going to get any more of them. I painted the two that were in the Silver Tower box, and I just thought that I was going to go towards Mortals. I thought I was going to go all Mortals and try and make it quite grounded and things. And I don't know exactly why I didn't do that, really. I think I don't know. Some point I decided I would give them a go. And I actually like how they look. I've got a lot of them to rebase, that's the thing. But I like how they look, and now I like how they... And initially, I guess I went through the other thing of not really liking how they played, because they're so weird.
They are weird, yeah. They're very good, though.
They're very good, but they're not good in the way that normal things are good, where they do a lot of damage, or they are tough, because they're neither of those things.
True, yeah.
They're good because they don't go away.
No, it's true.
And they can not go away in a way that is really annoying. It's not that they don't go away because they don't die.
Yeah.
They die, but then they don't. Did they? Who knows?
There's lots of flexibility when you summon them back as well to daisy chain and start doing weird stuff with them. And guaranteeing that with their Destiny dice is pretty strong. And plus they can cast Mystic Shield, as well, which is always useful.
Sometimes.
And Arcane Bolt, if they get it off, right?
Yeah. But yeah. Okay, next question comes from Craig. which is a long one, so bear with me. Hello, Mech Warriors and Mana Wars. I skipped a question. Just a second. 2 seconds, everybody who's listening to this. I'm sure. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. What I missed was, sorry, I was going to dial back slightly, and we'll get on to great question. I just wanted to, thing I did miss, which was, Fienya's intro, which was, hi there, Tomcast Eternal and Unknowable Thurston. I thought it was an equally successful attempt at turning our names into our
enjoyed that, yeah.
I just reminded myself that had happened, but we hadn't read it, so I just wanted to reiterate that. Good job, Pete. Anyway, sorry. Moving on back to Craig, who writes, hello, Mech Warriors and Mana Wars. Usual preamble about how I've gotten back into 40k because of the pod, and much appreciation for the effort you put into providing us with the richness of your games and enthusiasm. The conversations during the Battle Replay section on July's pod were eerily reminiscent of a number of situations I've run into in my years board, card, and wargaming. To be specific, it was Tom's comments regarding actions being right thematically but wrong winningly, and then Tom's run-in with the supercharged thaumaturge. In both cases, I sympathise with Tom and his dismay, while also hearing Chris using the exact same arguments I've used in the past to justify the outcome. In my experience, this sort of scenario seems to come up more frequently with new players, but can be especially vicious when it's with someone halfway up or down the playing experience bell curve. When it happens in Magic the Gathering or similar, it's usually a card interaction or a specific rule that the other player wasn't aware of, and is only relevant in this specific scenario that benefits me and wrecks you. When it happens in a board or tabletop game, I feel that it immediately drains a degree of enthusiasm from the other player, as though the information previously unknown basically invalidates the game and games before. Everyone on the winning side loves it when you get to pull out the trap card, but everyone on the losing side seems to hate it. According to my wife, I get that look on my face when I think I've pulled off something cunning. The question then is, how did you guys handle this off the pod and before the pod? Has Tom put the experience down to a learning one, or will you be changing your army intros to spell out the combos and similar before you launch? There's a huge level of satisfaction in pulling off a complicated trap, but if it comes at the cost of your opponent's enjoyment, then is the sacrifice a valiant one? Thanks for listening, Craig. He just thanks for listening us.
Hooray.
Thanks for listening me reading that.
The circle is finally complete between listener and podder. Yeah, it's an interesting one, this one. Like, I'd chalk it up to just not knowing enough about Chris's army list. And also, like, I just get annoyed at myself for feeling annoyed. Actually,
I get the same thing. Controlling salt is the actual frustration.
My main reaction afterwards was like, oh man, I shouldn't have gotten annoyed by that at all. Like, it's just take it, like, as it's presented rather than, like, being disappointed by it. But it's weird how, like, you can suddenly feel bad about something for no reason.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, and I said that at the start of the pod, something I keep coming back around to is, like, I think there is an unacknowledged degree to which successful miniatures wargaming is about controlling your negative reactions to things you can't really control.
Yeah,
it's about just keep having fun. Like, and it takes active effort, I think.
I think also, like, the rest of that game was really interesting, and it was, like, a really closely fought game. And, it's easy to focus on the negatives when we're talking about stuff, but, like, the rest, it was still, like, a tactically rich and interesting, battle.
Yeah. And like, so there were two things that, like, happened that we don't really have control over. One is, I started remembering rules that I keep forgetting. And I forgot them in our game today.
Yeah.
Like the thaumaturge regenerating, the thaumaturge getting stronger when he loses health. Things I remembered once. And there's no way for you to control things I will finally remember I should have been doing the entire time.
Yeah.
And that is, that had calibrated you to expect a certain degree of reaction from things and you didn't get it. And I can't tell you that ahead of time.
Yeah,
like, I'm going to suck less.
Yeah.
Like, the other side of it is that, I mean, I think at the beginning of that game I remember saying, I'm putting loads of eggs in the thaumaturge basket this game. Like, I've put loads of buffs on him. But simply reading through, that's a tension that I don't think you can resolve in a way that's going to be perfectly fair, which is you can read off the upgrades, and we do that, and explain how they work.
Yeah.
But beyond a certain point, you don't want to explain your entire game plan.
No.
Like, like I said, in that game, if I'd said, I've put all these buffs on the thaumaturge, and I think this means that mathematically he has the edge against the fulminators, so I'm going to try and bait you into going down this flank so I can charge you, then that changes the entire game.
Yeah, and you can't even do it, really.
Yeah.
I think it's like it's better the more I've played, because I've played way more games, like, because I'm pretty much playing the game weekly now. So, like, it puts less pressure on each individual, battle to like be rewarding in some way. Cause it does take, like we were saying earlier, there's a lot of admin, a lot of kind of like organization and getting a lot of stuff together for like a game each month, if you know what I mean. So if that's your monthly experience, then there's more pressure on it to be like a more positive experience. Whereas just playing it regularly now, like, I got horribly diced a couple of weeks ago, and you just sort of laugh it off once you're actually playing regularly.
I'm trying to I'm trying to get better at losing. Like, I don't think I'm terrible now, but like, I lose a lot. So I'd like, it's important that I'm good at it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like the 40k game we played last month.
Oh, yeah.
That couldn't have been more of a dicing. Like, it was absurd.
It's
like,
disgusting.
but it was fun, right? Like,
Yeah, it was still fun.
and I'm okay with that. Like, I do get frustrated with X-Wing. I have been frustrated in X-Wing and been ashamed of myself for being frustrated. I don't think I've ever been frustrated in a way that has affected somebody else. It's just the private stewing afterwards. Yeah. Or affected someone else beyond my friend getting my life story about the game afterwards, you know, that kind of thing. But I do think that for as many great interactions between people that wargaming encourages, people do have attitude problems. I was playing X-Wing at a place, in a room above a pub last week when I was having a brilliant time. My new attitude, kind of, or my readjusted attitude, kind of saving that game for me. But it was kind of surrounded by 40k players having arguments, which was my old experience of playing. When I started playing X-Wing, it was often in an environment like that, where it's like one to X-Wing table surrounded by 40k tables. And this was obviously the previous edition of 40k. But the reason X-Wing didn't translate into miniatures for me until I got Silver Tower was because every single time I was out playing my game, all of the 40k players were having arguments, were getting salty about stuff. You know, if they weren't arguing explicitly, there was that kind of like heavy sigh. You know what I mean? The kind of like, okay, I'm going to roll this, and it just didn't want to be part of that at all. And I want to make sure I do whatever I can to make sure that that's not the experience of me, and it's not the experience of like whatever circle of players I surround myself with. I'm just not into it. But it's not like I'm immune to it. I feel it.
Yeah.
When something goes, like, I didn't mention in Battle Report, finally figured out a minimum buff at the Lord of Change today. So and this is just a wonderful moment of maths. Lord of Change has, he does 2d6 ranged attacks. I rolled a 9. That's pretty solid. That's great. He hits on a 3-up, and I'd given him the buff that means he rerolls 1s. So he's rerolling 1s, hitting on 3s, and I rolled 6 2s. Yeah, that was the I took a photo of the 6 2. I'll put them in the show notes. And it was just, and my first reaction was, fuck. And this is when the game was going badly. Yeah. My first reaction was, fuck. And my second reaction was, hey! I've just painted this guy, and he's just like, his magic fireball spewing staff has just gone off like a sparkler. It's going everywhere. He's just happy to be there.
I think always expect your brand new painted new unit to fuck up the first time you put it down.
But you know, even then, even with this new, like this, well, it's hopefully always been what I want my attitude to be. But I'm trying actively to maintain it. I saw those dice and I just had that kind of feeling. It's just about whether you make it the other person's problem, I think.
Yeah, and also, like, in order for it to be a dramatic experience, you've got to have moments of disappointment. And if it's just a sign that you give a shit about what's going on, to an extent.
But it's got to be I think ways of expressing it. You're allowed to feel it, but it's about what you make the other person feel. Because, like, you know, if you have a negative reaction, then depending on the other person's character, then you enter a negativity spiral. Because either they're going to feel bad for making you feel bad, or they're going to feel bad because they think you're not taking it well. You know what I mean? Like, it'll either become hostile or it'll become like apologetic. And it creates this kind of like, you know, you have to remember, dice even out over time unless your dice are broken. You know, like. I still do this thing in X-Wing where if I roll an amazing damage roll, like we had a good moment of like unsalt in the game I played where like I rolled 3 natural hits on my 3 dice, and my opponent's ship had 1 health left, and his you know, it's his last ship remaining, so he's probably already lost the game. And he goes, and he has no way of modifying his defense roll, so he has to roll 3 natural evade results, which is less likely. And as soon as I roll 3 natural hits, he goes like, ugh, shit. And he goes, well, here come 3 natural evades, and he throws the dice, and it's 3 natural evades. And he's like, and we just both look at each other like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
On with the game. And then he managed to get some points out of that game in the end, because that happened. So it's just, these things balance out, but people don't take that long view in the moment. You see it and you're like, this could only happen to me, the unluckiest man in the world, ignoring the previous turn where something else happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's that thing of focusing on the negative as well. You don't remember when, it's harder to remember that time you got lucky, often minutes ago with having a vague knowledge of odds as well is, you know, and recognizing when you've rolled over the odds, which is saying,
And when
that's
you've
lucky.
given yourself the modifiers and things that make it likely that
Yeah.
you'll go over the odds. So like, I keep doing this thing where, cause I think when you're rolling a lot of dice, like 10, 15, 20 dice at a time, your eyes take a moment to pass how many it is.
Yeah.
And because often the Games Workshop dice have skulls on the ones, you see all of them first. So a lot of my time,
worse, doesn't
if
it?
I get like, often I'll get like a mathematically average or slightly above average roll for like my pink horrors who hit on a 4-up when they're shooting. I'll roll the dice and I'll go like, because the first reaction is, oh, there are some ones.
Yeah.
The second reaction is, oh, but I've hit with 6, which is slightly above average for a 4-up.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, actually, I'm fine. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, basically it's just a discipline thing. I don't think there's anything that's necessarily changed the way we play.
No, I don't think it's a problem with the game either necessarily. I think there's a lot of, it's very hard to, if you're going to play at a high level, you literally have to learn every army pretty much just to understand what things are able to do.
Which is why I'm going to try and succeed in terms of friendliness points and painting big men
Yeah,
on
nice.
Saturday. Our final question is more of a statement, and it comes from Isaac, who writes, Dear Krona and Quetzal? Oh, fucking hell. It's a currency. Not really a question as much of a statement, but with regards to the discussion about prices in the last episode, I decided to look up the cost of Lego sets as a comparison to Warhammer, and it turns out that an X-Wing costs £70, and that's not even the fancy collector's edition X-Wing, it's the bog standard children's toy X-Wing. I now feel much better about splurging a relatively paltry £35 on a Dark Eldar jet fighter, and very much hope that any children I have really hate Lego. Yours, Isaac.
Yeah, it's a
Interesting
good
point.
Yeah.
Hobbies are expensive. That's
They
a
are,
really
yeah.
good thing to come back to. It's really hard to do multiple hobbies, but yeah, I sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'll throw in a bonus round very quickly. Because
Yeah.
Jams wrote to say, what is best in minis? Pick one thing now.
Finishing a paint job
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. All right, fine.
after all that slog.
That's true. Yeah.
The moment it comes together.
Yeah. And that is all of the questions we have. Thank you for sending your questions. If you did, if you'd like to send a question for a future episode of Miniatures Monthly, you can do so by emailing us at miniatures@crateandcrowbar.com. That's our preferred way of receiving them. You can and absolutely should hang out in our Table Talk Discord channel, which is one of the channels in our Discord channel, which is the link for which is available on our website at crateandcrowbar.com. Everyone's really friendly, good place to share your work in progress picks. And if you're just getting into things, you need help. If there's kind of like a quick painting advice question that you're thinking about writing in, but you don't want to wait a month, go there. 'Cause
Yeah, definitely.
people will help you out. Another shout out to Mike Debenham, who produced our intro music. Thank you for his, again, for your amazing work. Still rad as hell.
Yeah, so good.
And I can take it some more. If you would like to follow us on Twitter or like follow our miniature stuff in social media generally, I'm on Twitter at C Thurston and on Instagram at Exit Warp. Tom?
I'm on Twitter at PCG Ludo, and I will start on Instagram again after my last one got hacked a month ago. By someone
One
from
day.
Russia.
You can also follow us collectively on Instagram at Minis Monthly, which is the feed for this podcast specifically, and you find some pictures there. And just to finally say that this podcast is a direct result of the Crate and Crowbar Patreon, which, supports us enough to obviously get the equipment we need, but also to cover, time and editing and stuff to make these things happen. So thank you very much. If you are a Patreon backer, and if you would like to become one or find out more, you can do so at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. That is all of our stuff until
Next
late
month.
September, when we'll return with stories of this event I'm going to, Armies on Parade,
General's Handbook.
General's Handbook. Catch you next time, guys.